the opportunity, Mr. President, to implement more creative and innovative plans to aid in the development of our people in the Tri-Island State that would in turn build resilience. What should have been the biggest event of national importance, Mr. President, turned out to be the biggest non-event of the year. Mr. President, this was an arrogant budget, an arrogance which speaks loudly to the fact that we are in charge, we have 15 seats, and it is not really a necessity for the people of Grenada to know the socio-economic development of their country. Going forward in this debate, Mr. President, my colleague and I will outline why this is so. Mr. President, I want to take you to page 24 of the 2019 budget statement, agenda 7.3 of the Minister of Finance's budget statement, whereby it stated that under the Basic Needs Trust Fund, BNTF, 13 primary school libraries were upgraded to be constructed in 2018. Mention was also made, Mr. President, on the completion of infrastructures, namely the St. David's Catholic Secondary School and so on. Now, Mr. President, apart from these establishments with infrastructures at the secondary level, I bring this Honorable House to the attention of what we see, as well as what some of our lecturers and students enrolled at the St. George's University see as a burning issue. Mr. President, approximately 7 years ago, one of our heritage buildings located in the capital city of St. George have been left to rot like many other historic buildings in our country. Mr. President, I speak of the Grenada Public Library building. As cited in the said budget statement, the Minister of Finance quoted a quote by Benjamin Franklin. Please permit me, Mr. President, to read aloud, and I quote, "An investment in knowledge pays the best interest," end of quote. Mr. President, our children of this country deserve to have the proper facilities so that they can feel comfortable and be more equipped in an environment that is friendly and conducive to learning. While we acknowledge in our views the baby steps towards educational development, we must ensure that we put the right mechanisms in place to advance our students for international markets and to continue to encourage them to indulge in reading, not just at the primary school level. Some of them, Mr. President, they come from broken homes and in most cases absent fathers. Let us not fail them any further. And it is with our hope that by our next budget, we will be seeing funds allocated for not just primary school levels, but for a state-of-the-art Grenada Public Library. And more so, Mr. President, we cannot leave our teachers out of this equation. I don't know for the other senators, but if we actually take a tour and visit some of the secondary schools on island, the library spaces allocated for them are tiny. We have to ensure that our nation's children can get information, because some of them we cannot turn down or deny the fact that some of them, they don't have that ability and they don't have that finance and resources at home. So reconstruction of the Grenada Library will be very beneficial for them, you know. So I think that is a burning issue, Mr. President. Mr. President, the Minister of Finance in the budget presentation indicated that there will be special programs to assist with what is recognized to be a growing problem among our youth. However, the focus and the amount, in short, the model, which the Minister of Finance seems to be promoting, cannot seriously address the tremendous crisis they face. Mr. President, we recognize that effort of business support centers and youth cooperatives are baby steps again in the right direction, but there needs to be much more developed plan for youth in Grenada currently. Mr. President, such a plan must seek to connect and build on various initiatives, which the Minister of Finance refers to as the new Imani. The problem that we have, Mr. President, is that the new Imani looks like the old Imani to us. What is required is not a focus on the name per se. What we need, Mr. President, is a radical departure from the Imani program to a new program that focuses on training youth and certifying them for opportunities that President Obama and others refers to as opportunities in the new economy. Mr. President, there was a time when the NMP championed this construct of the new economy. Where is that focus now? Where is the focus that promised us as youth that this Imani program would have been radically restructured? Mr. President, where is that focus that promised us that our youth will be exposed to ICT like never before? Mr. President, where is that focus that promised us our community centers? That our limited infrastructure would be pressed into service as serious hubs of learning for youth? Mr. President, has the now current administration of government abandoned this focus? Because the budget statement by the Minister of Finance appears to be a backpedaling of these commitments that were promised by him before. Mr. President, if the approach in this budget statement serves as an indication or serves as any indication of expectations, it represents a lowering of expectations by the very Minister of Finance and the rest of the administrators at a time when our youth, more than ever, need to be injected with the medicine of hope. Mr. President, the budget clearly signals to our youth that the Minister of Finance and the NMP today are less hopeful than they were on previous occasions when they presented the budget. Mr. President, I now want to turn my attention to health and to say that the announcement of the Guav Medical Center, which will receive funding under the EU project, is welcome. However, Mr. President, infrastructure does not make the delivery of health care better by itself. Indeed, Mr. President, our situation in St. John would have been a bit more dire were it not for the sterling and outstanding services of our nurses and doctors and our staff. I want to honor them. I want to recognize them for their efforts and to encourage them that in difficult circumstances they need to continue to go above and beyond their call of duty. Mr. President, I wish to turn my attention to the productive sectors in St. John. Enough cannot be said about the disregard to our agricultural sector. The budget statement, Mr. President, speaks loudly to this. The performance continues to suggest a rush to the bottom, Mr. President. Every year, sectoral performance appears to be worse and worse. Our agricultural sector continues to not be diversified. This lack of diversification refers to the automatic safety net, which the Grenada agricultural system has been historically recognized for. Mr. President, this administration has presided over the decimation of agriculture, which an automatic social safety net did not require handouts from the government. The focus, Mr. President, on key projects to rehabilitate the sector continues to be sadly lacking in the budget. There is no vision for agriculture, and as the saying goes, where there is no vision, the sector will perish. There is a lot more that I can speak about on agriculture, but my colleague already intends to bring the focus to such a painful circumstance. Mr. President, I want to pay particular tribute to the fishermen and those engaged within the fishing sector in our country. This is visible that their performance continues to be a bright spot for agriculture and fishing value added to our country, even in difficult times. Those engaged in fishing continues to make us proud by making their mark globally, Mr. President, by exporting high-quality fish for our entire economy in pointing Sorry, Mr. President, let me take that over. By exporting high-quality fish with extremely limited government support. They blaze a trail for our entire economy in pointing to what can be possible when some support by government is provided. Mr. President, I have heard the concerns of our fishermen, particularly in St. John. Many of them are concerned that the government is planning to lease the new fishing facility to a foreigner. Our fishermen in St. John have told me that they are eager, they are willing, and they are able to run the facilities themselves. I am bringing this matter to the public attention early enough so that the government can correct whatever plans they may be harboring to divest yet another Grenadian asset to foreigners. And Mr. President, if you would permit me, earlier this morning I heard a statement stating that in a time when most of our assets were sold, so I found it only fitting to refer to that scenario as an example of where assets are being harboring or contemplating to be sold or leased. Mr. President, the party that I represent, the NDC, is not against foreign participation in our country, but our unapologetic view is that such foreign participation must not come at the expense of our Grenadian participation. Mr. President, I move now to national security. Under national security, Mr. President, as some of us may know, there has been a number of domestic fires on island, which resulted in a number of fatal deaths of some of our most vulnerable population. As citizens, Mr. President, we often find ourselves blaming our RGPF and by extension our fire department for not delivering speedy recovery. However, Mr. President, we are not identifying the true stem of this problem. Mr. President, our firefighters of this nation deserve to work in better conditions, with both an advancement in technology as well as infrastructure. Mr. President, it is very atrocious to see the current state of our various fire departments and the way in which information is documented in a fire emergency. Mr. President, it is with our hope that in the near future, we will be seeing funds allocated to such an important cause, especially as we see some of our most vulnerable, like I stated, disabled children who can't even help themselves. And before a firefighter or the fire department attends to a particular fire, they must record the information before they sent out the fire brigade. This now is written in hand in a diary, and I think that it's by time we advance and bring in the technology towards helping develop our sectors when they need to seek out these emergencies. Mr. President, to conclude, I now turn to the social conditions of our young women in our country. I want to bring a focus to the realities facing young women with whom I identify in several important areas. When we speak about advancing our social development or advancing social development, we must speak about their unemployment status. We must speak, Mr. President, about their educational status. We must speak about the deteriorating social conditions, including child sexual abuse and domestic violence, as well as mental health problems. Mr. Speaker, we must speak and address these implications of all these factors for generations to come. Mr. President, I must speak these truths into the hearts of my colleagues senators, in particular my women senators, because while I speak these truths from a political place, these truths should not be politicized in any way. Mr. President, in summation, I want to extend season greetings to everybody that is a part of this honorable house, and I hope that in the new year, we will work on what should not be building resilience, advancing social development, transforming our economy, which are just phrases, but we should look at 2019 as a way of transforming our economy to build resilience and advance social development. I thank you, Mr. President.
The Honorable Judge Cadet.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Just let me say before you begin, Judge, Mr. Clerk, I really want this to be read into the records. The budget speech is a very important document because it pulls together several strands of what the estimate and expenditure is and gives an overview and contextualizes the allocations within the big budget document. It's an important part of the process. And for the Ministry of Finance to fail to provide legislators with copies of that budget speech is totally unacceptable, disrespectful. So I sit here, there are some senators who are quoting from sections of it I'm unable to follow. I mean, this is totally unacceptable. Public officers must take their jobs seriously. This is the lawmaking body of the state of Grenada, and we cannot be treated with this degree of contempt. Here we are, debating a very important, references is made to quotations and things said by the Minister of Finance. And the presiding officer is unable to follow because no copies of the documentation was provided to members of the House, I'm told. So, Clerk, I hope that this situation is immediately remedied, and at 9 in the morning, in the forenoon, that every member be provided with a copy of that very important statement. And I so order in respect of this House over which I have jurisdiction. Thank you very much. You may continue, Senator Cadet. By the way, excuse me, do you have a copy of this?
The big one? Yeah, I do have a copy.
Yeah, we got them here, Parliament, on the budget day.
On the day of the budget.
So every sitting member here has a copy? Well, anyway. You may continue.
All right. Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, this is my first time rising in this honorable House to give my contribution on the budget. Like everyone else in this honorable House, I have gained my appointment through support and recommendation from several people. So let me begin by expressing my gratitude to the Prime Minister for appointing me to be the voice of the young people in this honorable House. Special thanks to my parents, especially my mother, who has always been there for me in times of dire need. Hearty thank you to my teachers. Mr. President, my teachers played an important role in my life, and I know that they are extremely proud that their hard work are bearing fruits. And as a result, it is important that I note that they have been a critical component on my journey. I may not raise this again in my presentation, Mr. President, but I want them to know that I value their work, I value their effort, and whatever the end result in this negotiation, both parties should win. Special thanks to the young people of Grenada, Carriacou, and Petite Martinique for having the confidence in me that I will represent them well and articulate their issues here in this honorable House. Thanks to the members on this side. Mr. President, as a new senator, I rely heavily on Senator Steele, Senator Cox, Senator Gawi, and even the new ones as well, to guide me through the process. Special thanks to the people of St. Andrew, especially St. Andrew Southwest, the constituency where I reside. Mr. President, each constituency in St. Andrews has a special place in my heart. My grandmom was from Tivoli. This is St. Andrews Northeast. My dad from St. Andrew, yes, my dad from St. Andrew Northwest. I spent most of my early years in St. Andrews Southeast. And now, Mr. President, as I mentioned, I now live in St. Andrews Southwest. And so, Mr. President, I'm extremely grateful for the love and support that I've been receiving from the people of St. Andrew. Finally, and most importantly, special thanks to Almighty God for giving me life, good health, and strength. Without Him, all this wouldn't have been possible. Mr. President, every year, the team at the Ministry of Finance put together a comprehensive report that assesses the country performance of the previous year and current year and plan for the upcoming by outlining initiatives and projects to come. This is usually done on the foundation of the government vision for the country. This is what we call the budget. Like everyone here, Mr. President, I have had the opportunity to listen, read, and figuratively digest the estimates of revenues and expenditure for 2019 on the theme, Building Resilience, Advancing Social Development, Transforming Our Economy. Mr. President, I want it to be noted that I'm giving my unwavering support to the 2019 estimate revenues and expenditure. Before I delve into the details of the budget as it relates to young people, there are a few things I would like to address. As I was reading the budget, I asked myself some questions. Mr. President, I asked, in what context this budget is taking place? What is the experience of the average Grenadian after 5 years of the new National Party government? Are they better off today than they were 5 years ago? Do they think the economy is heading in the right direction? Are they hopeful about the future? Mr. President, these questions cause me to reflect and research not only on what this budget is trying to achieve, but also where this country came from and where it is going. And Mr. President, it's interesting. This is what I found. Prior to 2013, we had a government that was struggling to get this economy going. We had years of no economic growth and a debt-to-GDP ratio of 108%. Unemployment rate, Mr. President, 40%, and among youth was significantly higher. Mr. President, the private company whom government owed goods and services rendered were not being paid. No real opportunities for youth. There were many of them more hopeless about the future. And Mr. President, investor confidence was at an all-time low. Mr. President, context is important. If we're talking about a budget, I'm hearing that the budget was a waste of opportunity. If we're talking about the budget, we have to look at context. That is important. In 2013, the people decided that they needed an immediate change in government and voted the new National Party administration into government. Something had to be done. It needed to be done immediately. So the government introduced the homegrown structural adjustment program. Notwithstanding the negative views, some said they will destroy the country. They will send more people into poverty and even make comparisons to places like Greece and Jamaica that had an IMF program. Mr. President, again, context. It is important. Mr. President, a wink of an eye, the economy rebounded. And here we are today, Mr. President, a 6th year of growth. Unemployment slashed to 20.9%. 20.9%, Mr. President. A debt to GDP ratio of 62.7% and a growing investor confidence. Mr. President, context is important. Yes, I want to answer this question that I asked earlier. Yes, most people are better off than they were 5 years ago. Yes, our people are hopeful about the future than they were 5 years ago when they were hopeless. Yes, Mr. President, they believe the economy is heading in the right direction. There's no doubt about that. And as it relates to the context of this budget is taking place, Mr. President, this budget is ensuring that we safeguard our gains while at the same time advancing the well-being of our people. Therefore, Mr. President, I consider the theme of this budget very timely and relevant. I will now share my thoughts on the theme. Building resilience, advancing social development, transforming our economy. Mr. President, on building resilience, resilience cannot be overemphasized. And as a country, we had 2 hurricanes, Ivan and Emily, within a year. 2 structural adjustment programs within 20 years, 1990, 2013, that's about 23 years. And now, Mr. President, climate change, a major threat to the region. Mr. President, as small island developing state, we are the first to face the severe consequences of climate change, although we contribute very little. We cannot afford to sit idly by and watch our island be eaten away by the rising sea level and face the wrath of monstrous hurricanes. We must act now. It was Ban Ki-moon, former UN Secretary General, that said, we are the first generation to be able to end poverty and the last generation that can take steps to avoid the impacts of climate change. He went on to state further, future generations will judge us harshly if we fail to uphold our moral and historical responsibility. Therefore, Mr. President, I want to commend this government on seeing this as an important and urgent task. The budget speaks to establishing a contingency fund that will be geared towards assisting responses and recovery efforts in the event of a natural disaster. Again, that must be commended. This shows the importance of the fiscal responsibility law, which has received so much unjust criticism. And I think my dear Senator Kim George would have elaborated on the importance of the FRL. I also want to commend this government, Mr. President, on establishing the new Ministry of Climate Resilience. Mr. President, let's show foresight and vision of this administration. On advancing social development, Mr. President, when we talk about social development, we're talking about putting people at the center of development. We're talking about the health, the access to justice. We're talking about the poor and the vulnerable, and the programs that will help and protect them. We are talking about our elders who have served this country well and now depending on us to protect them, Mr. President. We are talking about our children and our youth, our future. Therefore, I see this theme very relevant, and I commend this government, again, for its bold step to introduce the National Health Insurance and restoring pension, Mr. President. Mr. President, the National Health Insurance will also make a big dent. As you would have seen, people walking around with sheets and asking for donations, I believe the National Health Insurance will get rid of that. Will help people be able to afford health care, make health care more affordable and accessible. I mean, Mr. President, I don't want to talk too much on the pension issue, but the government must be commended for restoring pensions. Mr. President, I've also heard so much on health, but I just want to go through the allocation to show how government has been serious about health. We have seen here that $5.6 million is budgeted more this year when compared to last year. Last year you had $82.3 million. This year you have $87.9 million budgeted. Additionally, we've seen that $7.5 million is expected to spend on health infrastructure. $3 million is expected to be spent on medical equipment, and $800,000 is expected to be spent on other projects. This gives a total of $99.2 million. Again, Mr. President, hefty sum is being injected in our healthcare sector to make a difference and to ensure that our people have access to quality health care. On transforming the economy, Mr. President, 5.2% growth is estimated for the year 2018, an increase by 1.9% when you look at the 3.3% that was conservatively projected in last year's budget. Again, construction, tourism, private education, manufacturing are the major contributors to the growth. Mr. President, in construction, no one can deny the fact that there's a rise in construction here in Grenada, from the small contractor to the big contractor. In local parlance, Mr. President, they're all eating our food. It's happening all over the island. You travel to the south, you're seeing the project of Silver Sands going on, Kawanappi. You travel to the north of the island, you're seeing the construction of Livra, you're seeing the breakwater projects. You're seeing so many projects happening, Mr. President. And Mr. President, I'm very confident that in 2019, we'll see additional growth in the construction. It is showing that construction has expanded to 29.1% in 2017, and it is projected that the sector will further expand to 14.9% in 2018. Mr. President, I just want to share with you an example, some examples that I have encountered as related to the construction, that there's so much activities happening that at some point we're unable to provide materials for the level of construction that is happening. A simple scenario. I visited this project in the south of the island, multi-million-dollar project. And the project manager was explaining to me that there were only 3 concrete mixers on the island. And when they had to do their concrete work, they had problems with, one, trying to schedule the truck, and 2, when the truck came to do the work, it caught a fire. And they rushed into panic mode. It shows, Mr. President, that the level of construction that is happening, that we have to look and see the business opportunity that currently exists. I'm hoping that the private sector can probably invest more money, the companies can invest more money to have a next concrete mixer, because you have to supply all this level of construction that is currently happening. Mr. President, another business opportunity that I am seeing, and I will speak of this later on in my presentation, is recently the owner of Silver Sands did this interview, and he said that, you know, Grenada is a beautiful place, nice place. And he had some problems when it comes to sourcing fine arts. You know, he went wrong trying to get some fine arts for his place, and rarely found any. Mr. President, the level of investors that we have here in Grenada are high and ultra high net worth individuals. And we have to up our game. We have to see a different niche, a different market that we need to serve, and also a different, more opportunities projecting for our people and our young people. So, Mr. President, on tourism, you see again, this is the next sector that has been showing some level of growth. And the minister spoke, the senator spoke about room stock. We're seeing that it is happening, it's evident. There's so many projects going on. Mr. President, I don't know if you had a chance to visit a point in Kalivini. Wonderful project, increasing the room stock. Kawana Bay expected to open next year, increasing the room stock. Silver Sands, phase 2 about to start, increasing the room stock. More people are coming in. We have to look at the room stock. And Mr. President, tourism has done exceptionally well this year. And again, the Ministry of Tourism and Tourism Authority and other stakeholders must be commended for that. So, Mr. President, it is evident that the government aims to transform the economy with major emphasis on youth development, especially skills development, information technology, small business development, and forging public-private partnership to drive innovation and development. Mr. President, I consider this budget, Mr. President, a youth budget. Because while there are things in it for everybody, who is going to benefit most in this budget will be the young people of Grenada, Carriacou, and Petite Martinique. It is very clear that this government don't just talk youth, but the actions matches the words. No other government in the history of Grenada has done more for youth as the new National Party administration. And Mr. President, I must say that I am proud as a youth here in the Parliament to be included in this journey, to be serving the young people of this country. I wish to commend the Ministry of Finance for acknowledging youth as a critical pillar in this budget. The consultation that was held at the National Stadium, we had a number of young persons turning out to that consultation. And they gave critical suggestions and ideas on how we can move this country forward and transform this country. And I also want to say, I want to commend them as well for taking the time. I know my dear senator on the other side was invited, and I think he was in Carriacou at the time. So I think the next one we have, he should make himself available, and some of the things that I've mentioned will probably be easily be identified that you're being solved. So, Mr. President, I want to go into the youth sectors in this budget that I've identified. Mr. President, there have been so much. First, juvenile justice and at-risk youth. Mr. President, the government continues with its mission to leave no youth behind. Hence, the government is placing significant resources on juvenile justice and our at-risk youth. The importance of juvenile justice lies in the established fact that youth are fundamentally different from adults, both in terms of the level of responsibility and potential of rehabilitation. The primary goal of the juvenile justice system, in addition to maintaining public safety and skill development, habilitation, rehabilitation, addressing the needs and successful reintegration of youth into the community. There's a fundamental link between juvenile delinquency and societal influence youth have been exposed to growing up. It is important to provide positive messages and role models to youth whereby they can be encouraged to be their best self. It must also be recognized that youth have varying level of development and varying level of interest, since we all are unique and should not be judged by a general standard. They must be encouraged to pursue what they like and therefore what they can excel at. Mr. President, the fact that our government see the importance to develop programs like the Aspire the Project REACH, the ACE project, Empower program. Mr. President, this shows the caring nature of this administration, that our youth, regardless of the background, regardless of the education level, that they needs to be addressed. And if we don't, the government philosophy is that if we don't help them now, we can create a greater social problem in the future. So as a result of that, government is pumping significant resources. Mr. President, you have to remember this government is the one that did the Grand Baccalaureate Resource Center. For years, Mr. President, I know I've been hearing about that between 2008 to 2013. Nothing about this was done. The government came in 2013 and was able to build the Grand Baccalaureate Resource Center. And now we are talking about building the youth wing at Her Majesty's Prison. So, Mr. President, this shows that we have that vision to successfully not only rehabilitate them, but to ensure that when they rehabilitate, because most of them have, most of these programs, they're being trained, they have life skills. The main aim is also to have them successfully be reintegrated into the community. And government is doing that by ensuring that these training programs have skill component, as you would see in the Empower program, that where young people are being trained in a particular skill area. And it's also shown that in government budget, that skills training is important. Because if we don't do that, Mr. President, we've seen what the IMF report said, that we have a mismatch of skills, that there are jobs available, but there are people without the skills to fill those jobs. And as a result of that, the government is taking decisive action, urgent action, to ensure that they address that by ensuring that our young people, especially our young men in the Empower program, are being trained and successfully get involved into programs. Mr. President, on youth empowerment, empowering our young people are sometimes given the wrong connotation. I've heard so much about our youth empowerment programs. Some see it as a waste of time, a waste of resources. Mr. President, I don't understand, as a young person, how one could see that changing one life, trying to have one become a better, productive citizen as a waste of time and a waste of resources. I don't understand this. I just can't understand this. And Mr. President, you know what is interesting about that, when I hear about waste opportunity, is that the people who normally mention about that did have an opportunity. They did have an opportunity. And Mr. President, let me share you an example with one of my dear friends who were in St. George's University during the period of 2008 to during the period before 2008, prior to 2008. Mr. President, she was doing well in school, was very hopeful that when she finished, she will be an expert in the field of social work. And she had a bright future at the time. And lo and behold, in 2008, government changed, and she thought, no big deal, I'm going to go to school still. Apparently, her father lost a job at CCC. Just like that, her dreams shattered. And Mr. President, she became a very frustrated young person. It was my good friend. I won't call her name, but it's my good friend. And Mr. President, it didn't take about 5 years after to regain hope, in 2013, when the new National Party come back in power. Mr. President, what is even more uplifting about that? The same thing that they call it waste of time, waste of resources. She got involved in the Imani program. And last year, she graduated of St. George's University with honors in social science. Mr. President, I don't know what is waste of time and waste of resources about this. You're changing lives. You helping someone become a better, productive citizen, and it's a waste of time, waste of resources, Mr. President. Anytime I hear that, sometimes I feel to cry. Because honestly, I just think so much young people who have given this opportunity are unfairly being judged. Some of them see them as incompetent, and that's far from it. That's far from it, Mr. President. So I must commend the government for its bold step in ensuring that the MANI program, the Empower program, are programs geared towards giving young people opportunities so that they can develop themselves and also be hopeful about the future so that they can achieve their dreams. Mr. President, I also want to commend the government as well. That when all the talks was about the 2 years up and they need to be sent home, I must commend the government for taking that bold step and saying that no youth will be sent home. Because, in a sense, if you send them home, what are they going back home to do? You know, they get an opportunity, and they feel that they're now contributing to the economy. They're paying bills at home. Some of them have started a small business, although it's not, some of it may not be able to stand on its own as yet, so they're still in the program. And we see that as a waste of time, waste of resources, so we should just send them home. And the government took a bold step that it's not going to send anyone home. And I must commend them on this, because, Mr. President, it shows that the government, it's mentioned in the Prime Minister's speech, shows that the government is really caring and is understanding and has a heart. This government has a heart. And, Mr. President, it's good to be knowing. Some might think we have the wrong symbol. I mean, the politics should have been different. It should have been a heart, because this government is showing to have a heart. And it's caring for our young people. And that should be highly noted, Mr. President. Mr. President, on education, another empowerment initiative by the government. We're seeing that $118.1 million is being allocated this year for the Ministry of Education. Mr. President, $6 million more than what was budgeted last year, was allocated last year. Last year, you had $112.1 million. This year, you have $118 million. It also shows the government vision when they talk about social advance and social development. That's what they mean, showing that they continue to invest more in areas that will definitely empower people and empower our youth. And that's exactly what the government is doing. Because, Mr. President, it is often said that education is a gateway for many opportunities. And it is important that young people take their education seriously. And when the government is giving 173 scholarships in a year, that talks volume. That talks volume. Mr. President, I don't understand what in this budget someone said was a waste of opportunity. I just can't see it. In the last 5 years, you had 1,200 scholarships was given. More young persons given opportunity to go study, come back, be productive citizens contributing to the development of this country. They will be our future leaders, doctors, lawyers, engineers. Mr. President, these are the people that we're investing our resources in. And you know what's also interesting about this, Mr. President, is that sometimes you hear the talk about this government don't care about education. I don't understand this again. How you could don't care about education and you're giving more scholarship ever in the history? Ever in the history of this country, more scholarship is given. So I don't understand this as well. I think that's a flawed concept. And some people need to move quickly and address that concept. So, Mr. President, what I would like to see, though, is that with technology, that we move towards the smart classrooms I think that is going to also enhance the whole idea of information communication technology. And I will speak more of this as I reach the ICT area. But Mr. President, I must commend the government again on its efforts and its commitment to the young people in terms of continuing to develop the education and the human resources of this country. Mr. President, in culture and arts, we hear a lot about this area. Again, government, again, is commitment to our young people that, you know, their involvement in these areas cannot be underserved. We have to look at these areas as critical areas that is contributing well to our economy. You hear now about the creative economy, which we call now the orange economy. This is a game changer, you know. I'm sure most persons was looking at television on Sunday, or if not, they got it Sunday night, when you had Dalton Harris, the Jamaican, won the X Factor overnight, from a poor man to a millionaire, overnight. Yesterday, I was showing my friend something, Mr. President. I don't know if you have Instagram, but I was going through Instagram, and I said, let me look at what Dalton was at that time last year. And I looked and I saw that Dalton had 1 like on Instagram. 1 like, December 3rd, 2017. And I go on Dalton page, and I go to the picture that he posted, December 3rd, 2018, 71,000 likes. Overnight. He have changed his whole life. And Mr. President, that's when the government talk about the creative economy, the orange economy, culture and arts. We want to give young people that hope that they too can achieve greatness. Mr. President, Mr. President, interestingly, yet the ones I got a friend request from you, but apparently it was a fake account. But yes, a fake. I had to report it. Yeah. So again. Yes. That is what I've seen. So I had to. Yeah. So, Mr. President, I am of the view that the fact that the government is highlighting culture and arts, and what's interesting, Mr. President, they have noted that the Simon Cultural and Development Center will be commenced in 2019. In fact, work already started. I saw the clearing up being done, and it will be the mecca of cultural activity. Mr. President, this must be commended because, you know, this has been there for some time. I am from St. Andrew, and I've passed it several times, and I see the center there. I know the inspector will be extremely happy because every time he meets the Prime Minister, he always talk about Simon. So I know the inspector will be happy to have this the center back, as well as many young persons who are going to have that opportunity now. Sure, they're going to have culture, but I'm expecting that they may have cultural programs that is running in the schools. Here, government talking about the introduction of music labs in schools. I have a couple of friends that left their work to build rhythms. I asked them if they were crazy. Stay home building rhythms every day. Mr. President, one driving, I'm not driving it, one driving a big vehicle, the other one opening a next business. Because, you know, they're selling their rhythm, artists singing on their rhythm, and they're getting money. So we have to look at, so when the government, you see, Mr. President, that's what's called about vision, you know. Sometimes you don't always see it, but you eventually come to the reality that it could work. And that's what the creative orange economy, culture and art, which was mentioned in the Prime Minister's budget presentation. That's what it seeks to do. So, Mr. President, this budget has so much, and I must commend the team at the Ministry of Finance and the Prime Minister and his cabinet for this vision being laid out here. Mr. President, I want to talk about information communication technology. Another game changer. So, you look at this. Youth empowerment, the money empower, youth at risk, and juvenile justice, culture and art, the creative economy being mentioned. These are youth areas. These are youth areas I'm going through. No, we're talking education. More scholarships being given than ever before. Now we're talking about ICT, information, communication, technology. And it's our next part of, it's our next economy. We call it the digital economy. And the government is also signaling its effort for the digital economy. Mr. President, we cannot go wrong with this information communication technology. You know, it changed the way we communicate now. This more people using LOL, people using SMH, shaking my head. You know, this is the language we use. I mean, Mr. President, it may not be the good language, but that's how people communicate digitally these days. You know, we send a wave on Facebook, we send thumbs up, thumbs down. That's how it is. It changed the way we communicate. Sure, Mr. President, when you had to send a letter, you have to, before you had to send a letter, and it takes days, it takes seconds. You have to go down Cable and Wireless. You know, it takes days to get, before when you start to send, try to get, get information out. But now you're doing it within seconds. It changes the way we shop. You know, these days you just stay at home and you just go and you put something in the cart. I'm sure for Christmas, well, I've ordered some stuff on Amazon for Christmas. And a lot of young persons do that. No one really pays attention to walking into a store these days. You just do that. You go and pick up your stuff and you go home. That's how it's being done these days. So technology is important. And if we don't see this as a critical component of this advancing or developing this economy, then, Mr. President, we'll lose a serious race. And I'm happy that the government has mentioned this. Mr. President, the discussion today is not only centered around software development. And I'm happy that the government mentioned about modernizing the public service by ensuring that there are platforms that already exist so that you can do everything digitally. But the discussion today is not only centered around software development. The discussion is now centered around artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, data analytics, robotics. This is the discussion that they're having today. So when the government have information communication technology as an area that could transform the economy, it shows vision. It shows a government that has knowledge and are willing to empower people to take up those jobs that is to come. But I would like to see, Mr. President, though, the greater emphasis on what you call STEM education: science, technology, engineering, math. These days, it's easy to learn to code. You know, you simply use Scratch. Deputy President, sorry. So these days, it's easy to get onto a platform like Think and Scratch. So we need to look at that. And I heard the Minister of Education spoke about the efforts that we go into ensuring that we have young people getting acquainted with the technology and the technological platforms. You know, it's easy for jobs. You don't only have to stay here. You don't have to find work here, but you could sit home and do work elsewhere. In fact, this company that I know of, Sonova, they've got 2 awards at the last Grenada Chamber of Industry and Commerce Business Award in November. They got 2 awards. They got the Excellence in Application of Digital Technology and the Rising Star Award. These are some young guys, my good friends, under 30, and they have developed some really cool technology. And as I said, they focus on artificial intelligence, software development, Internet of Things, data analytics, cloud computing. That's what they focus on. The last communication I had with my good friend, he said to me that they are now doing business with a company in Africa. You know, they're here, but they're doing business with a company in Africa, and they're employing people. So, Mr. President, again, information, communication technology is important. And I must commend the Minister of Finance for saying this in this budget. Mr. President, on youth in agriculture, Mr. Deputy President, youth in agriculture. I know this is your area, but the government highlights its mission to have young people in agriculture. I always try to wonder, Mr. Deputy President, I know me and you have the discussion several times, that I would think that farmers should not be having problems for market now. You have more hotels, so which means bringing more people, they need to eat. So you should be selling to those hotels. But sometimes we leave it all to government to do those things. These are private sector initiatives. What is happening in what I've seen happening in agriculture is the lack of cooperatives. Farmers don't want to work together. Serious problem. But the government is not daunting, and we have to get young people involved because you have an aging population of farmers. Young people need to get involved. You know, Mr. Deputy President, the only time I realize people get involved in agriculture is when they need an additional source of income. Because it's easy. You have a piece of land. You say, boy, I have a mortgage, I have this to pay. I have a piece of land. Let me go and plant 2 trees of this, 2 trees of that, 2 trees of tomatoes. And they get that, and that helps you supplement for the month. But that's the only time you hear people talk about agriculture. Most of them have not studied to become agriculturists. They're doing other jobs. So, Mr. President, we have to get our young people involved in agriculture. The government mission to get youth in agriculture is important. And, the establishment of cooperative, ensuring that they have a cooperative, but not only the establishment of cooperative, but these young people have to understand conflict resolution. Because it's serious in cooperative. What is break up a cooperative? The first thing is when a man don't trust you with the money. Man say, well, something wrong somewhere, and then he take 2 acres of land if he could, and he gone somewhere and he do his planting for himself. So I commend the government again for seeing youth as an important pillar in the agriculture sector. Mr. President, they could transform this area, you know. They could transform this area. I'm seeing 2 projects here that the government talk about in agriculture that I consider extremely exciting. And that is the next thing about agriculture. I think sometimes, Mr. President, our farmers need to do better marketing. Because when you talk to me about a lawyer or a doctor, you see nice tie, nice clothes, nice this, nice vehicle. You don't see that all the time with the farmers. And that's a serious issue. Whether we want to accept it or not, that's a serious issue that we have to try to rebrand this so that our young people could be interested in the farming. And I'm seeing these 2 projects here that I find is exciting. That if young people get to know about those projects, you get more young people interested into the agriculture. So let me tell you these 2 projects that I have found, Mr. President. I have found that the Prime Minister mentioned, the Mount Pleasant Estate. This project involves the construction and equipment of crop production and agro-processing facility. The value of the project is $8.1 million, you see. Mr. President, that sounds really cool to me. Really cool. It's a project that I think I want to go and see for myself and have maybe hands-on to see maybe I could one day in the future maybe invest in something like that. Synergia Incorporative, establishment of a diversified agribusiness operation comprised of hydroponics. Hydroponics, Mr. President. Next exciting area. Science. This is not just seed in the soil or grow, but you're seeing a different level of science. I don't believe this investment would have come any time in any government because the economy was in shambles. It's coming under this government because the economy is doing well. This must be commended. This must be commended, Mr. President. Mr. President, it's amazing. Mr. President, this budget has so much for young people. I don't understand what people mean by there's nothing there for youth. Everything in this budget is youth, you know. Everything. You want to talk about climate resilience, you're talking about youth. Small business development, Mr. President, the next key area. Mr. President, it's an established fact that the government can provide jobs to everybody. It's an established fact. So we have to look at how do we provide incentives? How do we get young people excited about small business? I always find it's really interesting that people go to university, study business management, and then comes back looking to work for someone. I always find this really upward. So the small business development component is what government is saying here. Listen, there's the commercial banks, you won't get really financing unless you have some level of capital or security. So the government is saying here, we are going to establish this small business development fund that you can access. In some cases, you have up to $25,000. Start a small business. You don't need to start big. Most businesses seem big today, they started small. I know one businessman said to me they started in the backyard. Today it's a multi-million-dollar company. So, therefore, our young people need to take advantage of those opportunities. And it's clear that small business development, which done well, can drive this economy very efficiently. And I think it's a philosophy of this government. They always talk about it. Now, once we get small business development going, this will drive the economy. Because these young persons will not only, they're not sole proprietary, not they alone that probably in most of the times been working for themselves. When they expand, they employ 2 peers of them. They expand again, they employ more people. And before you know it, Mr. President, they're a multi-million-dollar company. All young people need to have to understand this and have to understand the value of entrepreneurship to this economy. Need to understand. We always talk about the Bill Gates and the Steve Jobs, but we need to talk about our own. We need to talk about our own that is starting their business and are doing well. And the government, again, must be commended, again, Mr. President, for small business development being identified as a pillar to transform this economy. That is what transformation of the economy is all about. Mr. President, we want to talk about sports. I should have talked about it earlier, but we want to talk about sports because, Mr. President, this is an area, again, that I think we should never take for granted. You know, we see how Kirani done well with using sports. We see now that we have a number of stars outside there. And Mr. President, sometimes one will say, Dr. Mitchell loved too much big thing. We built a big stadium. Mr. President, this is because of the vision of Dr. Mitchell, the vision of this government, that this stadium will not only just a stadium, but it's aspirations of many young people that will go to the stadium and transform their lives. Many young people transform their life by track. Imagine you could have had this dot track and then imagine if you still had dot track. You still have dot track running 200-meter dot track, some may not even get anywhere. So our young people are being able to utilize this facility, and they're doing well. Anderson Peter is a good friend of mine. Mr. President, in case you didn't know, I at one time attempted running to become a professional athlete. It didn't work out, but I'm happy because I'm standing here. So it didn't work out, but I'm happy I'm standing here. But Anderson, a good friend of mine, I've trained with him, doing well in javelin. Philip Marcel, good friend of mine again, I've ran with him. He beat me a couple of times, but again, he's doing well outside there. Linda Victor, next friend of mine again, doing well. You think recently he would have won the Commonwealth? The Commonwealth decathlon, in the decathlon division, doing well. And his brother, Kurt Felix. Mr. President, this is what the National Stadium is doing, transforming our young people's lives. And we are doing well in other sporting areas, the netball. We're doing well. We're doing well in the swimming. Mr. President, sport is an important component of transforming this economy. Remember, we are not all the same. Some people born with different skills. I know one of my good friends, Renisha Stafford. She's a netballer. She's good height. You know, she's really good. And I see that she's doing extremely well in the netball. So she's traveling now, going out to other places. And volleyball. So thank you. And volleyball. So she's doing well. So, Mr. President, again, this must be commended as our next pillar that has been added to transforming the economy. So, Mr. President, the only thing that I want to touch on before I conclude is jobs. But all those areas that I mentioned is going to create jobs for our young people, really and truly, when you look at it. When you look at the projects that the government has mentioned, real jobs is going to come in 2019. Real jobs are being created. Real jobs is going to come. And that is what the Imani program looks to as well, Mr. President. Another area that I've spoken about already. But it's preparing you for the jobs to come as well. That is what it's doing. You know, Silver Sands Open, you know how many young these Imanis that Silver Sand has taken up? And then we have Kawana Bay to come. We're former Imanis, thank you. You know, former Kawana Bay to come, that will not take additional some again. And we have much more projects again to come. Mr. President, jobs. This government have a recipe for jobs. I think we should share it, but it only will be shared when they have some level of leadership. And we haven't seen any as yet. And vision. This government have that recipe to create jobs. You think about it, was 40% unemployment. Now we're 20.9%. So why tell me we don't have the recipe? We have a long way to go, Mr. President, but still it is working. That is what it is. It is working. And I believe that it will go even lower. You know, the most exciting thing is when it's with single digits. And as well, I know it's going to be single digit. The level of project that you see, Mr. President, that is coming, significantly huge project. So, Mr. President, in closing, I want to say that this budget, as stated, is a youth budget. Young people have so much to look forward to in 2019. This government mission and vision has always been centered around youth development because, Mr. President, we are the future, and they have also acknowledged that we are the present because the fact that myself and Katisha and Kim are here, they're also acknowledging that we are the present. And my dear friend, Senator Karen, and my dear brother Ron, all right, I must say that we are the present and the future. So I strongly believe that this budget reflects the government plans and mission for young people. And our youth need to take these opportunities that are coming seriously, make good use of those opportunities. And Mr. President, you could provide the opportunity. But if they're not taking it seriously, then we may have a problem. So that's why, again, the life skill component in most of these programs is important, teaching you how to take those things seriously. So, Mr. President, I, again, endorse this budget. I give my full support to the 2019 estimate revenues and expenditure, and I want to wish you and your family and everyone here Merry Christmas, season greetings, and I hope we could all have that ham and cake. We could eat that, drink some wine, and have a good time this Christmas and New Year. Thank you, Mr. Deputy President.
Thank you, Senator Kadi. At this point in time, we're going to ask Senator Ron Redhead to take the floor. Thank you. But remember, you have 1 hour and 15 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy President. My good friend, Mr. Deputy President, through you, Senator Judd Cadet, that song as a political presentation as opposed to really and truly commenting on the budget. But I must commend him. Mr. Deputy President, before I begin, I just want to say that he is somebody that seemed to be trying extremely hard, and I want to, Mr. President, in the interest of youth, certainly join and mention that we could have, at the level of the Senate, a lot of young people engaged in discussing budgets, etc. And, Mr. President, our firm belief of, Mr. Deputy President, rather, our firm belief of a budget is that it should be an improvement really and truly from its last one, right? Essentially, Mr. Deputy President, outlining in a real way the true objectives that can and will, in some instances, improve the well-being of the country for a specific period. So the well-being of the country and the people for that specific period. Mr. Deputy President, we would have hoped, but unfortunately, that is not our sentiment at all this afternoon. And please allow us to mention a little bit as to why that is the case. And Mr. Deputy President, I want to begin by analyzing the theme of the budget. It says here, building resilience, advancing social development, transforming our economy. But the question that comes to mind is, what is resilience? How do we build resilience? How do we advance social development? And how do we, as a people, transform our economy? These are the questions, Mr. Deputy President, that I think this House should ponder on before we proceed. And the reasons for these questions is to develop the real link in the mind between the words used in the theme and the budget statement presented. And we are not satisfied, Mr. Deputy President, that the theme and the statement is in cohesion. So herein, Mr. Deputy President, lies our first problem with Budget 2019. We believe that the theme is a mismatch, and it would have best been read as transforming our economy to build resilience and advance social development, which would have given the budget more context and purpose of its original objective, which the minister claimed it to be. So, Mr. Deputy President, the theme really and truly does not satisfy us, and it lays the basis for arguments against this budget 2019. And I want to take this Honorable House to page 28 of the Finance Minister's budget speech on the youth development. Now, we see here, mention was made of business support centers. That sounds good. And the minister went on to suggest that the government would set up these centers to support business ideas, among other things. Again, that sounds good. But, Mr. Deputy President, no mention was made where these centers would be erected, what type of business would be supported by the centers, or even most importantly, when would we see the commencement of construction of these sectors? So again, you make the pronouncement. Is this just a promise, Mr. Deputy President? This is the question. You just announce it. There is no clear objective as to what these things will do, what it would be, where it would be rather, and so on, but you just announce it. That is what we are seeing with this. So he went on, Mr. Deputy President, to speak of the cooperatives coming from these centers as having the potential to create lucrative jobs. Now, let's pause here for a moment, because I have been studying cooperatives, and nowhere in my research have I discovered that they are set up to create lucrative jobs. And I want to be very clear on that. In fact, Mr. Deputy President, my research showed that a cooperative has 4 basic objectives. 1, to provide support and services to its members. 2, to provide mutual benefits. 3, to provide fair and transparent activities. And 4, to deliver quality goods and services to its customers. So this idea on page 28, on the youth development immediately, the announcement of the business support centers and the cooperatives creating lucrative jobs, Mr. Deputy President, is not true. It's very misleading. Mr. Deputy President, moving to page 29 of the budget speech, still under youth development and under the heading of the Imani program. And we heard through you, Senator Judd Cadet, explaining, quite in his best way, what he believes the Imani program to be. And that is fair. We want to share that view similarly. And we would make it clear, Mr. Deputy President, that we are not opposed to training our young people. Let's get that out of the way. You are the one who is saying that. We are not saying that. We have never said this. In fact, we have continued the program 2008 to 2013. And that's proof. So we are not opposed. But again, you have to look at this thing much deeper than just the announcement. Right? You have a situation, Mr. Deputy President, where the government is not being clear on the objectives of the program. Because I'll tell you what, it says here that the program is just an avenue to provide training for the youth to enable them to transition into sustainable employment. But then the minister went on to speak of a time frame for seamless transition of trainees into the world of work, which according to him would be finalized in 2019. Again, we are not sure whether this is for January or December 2019, but it was just announced. It will be finalized. It begs the real question, Mr. Deputy President. What is the true objective of the Imani program in 2019 that the government has set out here? It is not clear. It is just saying that we're going to train more young people, we're going to train more young people. But that is not clear. Because if we go further, mention by the minister was made that the private sector would now have to come on board to pay 50% of the stipend. And Mr. Deputy President, that to me seems to indicate something. Because if you're now boasting that the program is doing things which nobody seems to know other than maybe the political objective, I'm playing devil's advocate. I hope I don't impute, and no member would want to rise to challenge that. But the question really and truly lies. What is the Imani program doing to benefit the young people? Now, I would ask this question. What is the relation between the Imani program and the youth unemployment rate? Where is the data to suggest that it has actually been improving the situation? We're hearing the announcements, we're hearing talk, we're hearing all the goodwill and all the so on, but what is its objective? That is not clear in Budget 2019. And in fact, let me just quote the minister again. And he stated, Mr. Speaker, up until recently, the government bore the cost of the Imani program, unquote. Now, again, this statement is the catalyst to suggest that this really and truly was a transfer payment. Government was just fighting to keep this program alive. The program essentially was living on its fat, and it is just something that they want to sustain, not because they are helping the young people. Because again, how many young people out of the program have received permanent employment? How many of them? What is the rate? What is the status? Nobody seems to know. All we keep hearing is more and more pronouncements. And let's couple that now. Let's look at that situation. So you're saying the business sector has to come on board to pay 50% of the stipend. But you keep expanding the program. You're saying that the farmers can't get benefits because they need to see it as a private sector initiative. They need to do their own thing. They need to become more creative, what have you. But here you have a situation where the government is actually increasing a program to which it can sustain. Then we had a question about fiscal responsibility and fiscal discipline only being applied to the workers. But when you have a situation like this, a transfer payment, this program does not have any data to suggest what is it achieving. But the government is fighting to keep it on. We believe in young people. We want to support young people. But it cannot be that you're setting up something on an unstable foundation and you expect it to survive. I would just like to say for the benefit of this house that a wise man built his house on a rock. Foolish man built his house on sand. While this program sounds good, there is no depth to this program. It's not really changing anything, and we must be honest about that. Now, in addition to this assistance or plea from the private sector, the government is launching a new program. It's called now the Empower Program. Okay, we accept that. We hear you. But I want to really ask the question. Again, you announced this program. It was launched in October of 2018. What is the objective of the program? And let me say this. It says here in the statement that the program was set up to specifically address the challenges facing our young men, unquote. That is all that it says. So the program was launched in October, and it was just set up to specifically address the challenges facing our young men. What is the objective of that? We see, Mr. Deputy President, this as something that could have been best applied under the Ministry of Social Development, not youth. You could have taken that money, and by the way, we don't know how much this program is costing. There was no mention, really. I would have to double-check the bigger budget, the bigger book to really and truly determine. But we don't really see an actual cost in the budget statement. But you announce it. So again, you're saying that you're doing things for the youth. Again, the objective is not clear. We don't know what the purpose of this is. We don't know, again, what will it really address. Specifically address the challenges facing our men. That's all it says. That's not sufficient. So if we are talking about advancing social development, if we are talking about transforming our economy, these things cannot happen in isolation. That is the real link that I'm trying to make. You cannot just announce these things because of words and then expect the public to digest it. And government alone must apply whatever measure it sees fit to determine how it's going to achieve such a program. So you're asking the young men to come on board. What do they do? How do they dress? Where do they go in order to sign up, to apply? What is the method? What sort of thing? Is this just another wing of the Imani program? the same Imani program which you announced that you can't pay for, and you're asking the private sector to make 50% of the stipends available to assist? This is not fiscal discipline. Why is it only being applied to the workers and the working people of the country? That is a real question, Mr. Deputy President, that we have to ask. Again, the issue with the Imani program itself and data, we have a serious challenge with that. I have made efforts in the past to find out a little on the program. And you know what was the funny thing? Every time I go for information, it's either I get a story or some sort of thing. And I don't want to be rash to anybody because I have a very good relationship with people. And people who are doing their work, I don't challenge that. I'm a very, Mr. Deputy President, rational individual. But this is really and truly unacceptable. We cannot be announcing millions of dollars being spent on programs, we say, to transform the youth, and there is no clear objective. So again, we don't know if this program is set up to give a job or to be a job in itself. We don't know. We hear that it is for trainees. But training for what purpose? Is it a training for the private sector? This is what we are not clear on. So I hope this is some serious food for thought in relation to that. Because, Mr. Deputy President, we believe that Grenada needs a proper youth, human resource, and job training development program, a proper one. And let me tell you what I mean by that. I visited the National Training Agency on more than one occasion. We discussed a number of things related to skill development in the country. But what is apparent, in my view, is there seems to be some disconnect and mismatch. So here we have a program with either employable youth who are unemployed or young people who are underemployed, some of who are skilled already, but they still come into a training program. But you have a large section of the youth population unskilled and are not able to tap into the program. So we discussed in detail some serious initiatives that we believe can help. And one of the things that I want to recommend is the national conversation for the NTA, the private sector, trade unions, and even the government, to form some sort of collaboration to really and truly, once and for all, come up with a program to help in this regard. This program, the Imani, is insufficient. While we respect the need for the government to invest in training for the youth, it must not see it just to invest the resources into oblivion, and we don't see that the country itself is getting value for it. So, Mr. Deputy President, we have that as a serious challenge. I really, really, really want to stress that because I think throughout the number of years, even going before 2008, the New National Party has always been just using this program for politics. And I want to be very clear. If, in fact, we are engaged in fiscal management, fiscal discipline, no government official must see the need to use the country's resources just to be buying votes. I want to make that absolutely clear, because this, Mr. Deputy President, must tie into the position that I want to raise. Now, I see in the Prime Minister's ministry that $6 million was budgeted, right? Now, that is grant funding. We respect that. $6 million was budgeted for the period 2008. In this budget statement, it said that, in fact, $9 million was spent in his ministry, the Office of the Prime Minister, a non-productive ministry, right? Even if we are getting free money, even if we are getting whatever the thing is, I do not understand what the Office of the Prime Minister is doing with that large amount of monies. And we continue to monitor this situation because, in fact, the last time we raised the question, we were told...
A point of order, Chair.
It's a point of order. You need to say.
A point of order. Allowed the conversation to roll to see where the senator on the other side is going. But what is being done is imputing improper motive. He's taken this conversation far too far now, implying that the Imani program is politically based. We've just heard presentations on this side going through the content of that program. Now the conversation is raising up to the Prime Minister's office with regard to the intent of this program. Buying votes. buying votes. That statement needs to be withdrawn, Mr. Deputy President. That statement needs to be withdrawn. The senator on the other side has taken this conversation far too far. We've given him latitude. He is out of order, Mr. Deputy President. I want that statement withdrawn.
Mr. Deputy President, I respect the right of the leader of government's business to raise this point, but I have not imputed anything. I have not. This is, in fact, a fact. And I am not trying to say that that is the objective. I have said, in the budget statement, there is no clear objective set out for the Imani program. What is the purpose? This is the question that I am trying to ask for the benefit of this House.
Mr. Deputy President, his comments were very clear as to what he believed the motive was. Buying votes. He's smiling, Mr. Deputy President. He knows exactly what he said. He knows exactly what he is imputing. That statement needs to be withdrawn. There is a clear purpose to the program, clear objectives. It's a defined program that has been running for the last 6 years, that you have skilled persons, opportunities created, highly legitimate, highly valuable program. Statements that he is making completely false, and he is imputing improper motive behind that. The statement needs to be withdrawn, Mr. Deputy President. And what I'm hearing, read the script I'm hearing, sounded very much like an argument I heard on the television just a few nights ago on MTV. So some of the arguments that are based behind that are kind of a little suspect. That statement needs to be withdrawn, Mr. Deputy President.
Senator Redhead, based on what I'm seeing here, and I'm just trying to read the standing orders, I will have to ask you to revise your statement.
Well, Mr. Deputy President, I so do accept, and I am sorry for saying that the intent of the program is to buy votes. I am sorry for saying that. So I withdraw it, right? I do apologize. So, Mr. Deputy President.
Leader of the House Business, are you okay with the statement?
I want to hear a very clear statement from him in terms of what statement he made and his withdrawal of that statement, because it's false and incorrect. I want no ambiguity in his response.
Leader of Government Business, I think the statement that he has made is fine. He has withdrawn. Well, not the statement, but he has drawn the meaning. Yeah. Yeah.
I saw a big smile on his face.
Well, Leader of Government Business, I think I would just ask him to proceed because he has made an attempt to, and I think that is sufficient at this point in time.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy President. Mr. Deputy President, I want to move to the sector known as agriculture. Now, Mr. President, the agriculture sector has seen an allocation of about $145 million. And $95 million of that was allocated for field roads, $38 million for the Climate Smart Agriculture Program, and $12 million allocated for the AgriCom project. Now, again, we see a problem here. Here, we are talking about the agriculture sector, and I just heard the Senator Jordan on the other side, through you, Mr. President, mention about the benefits and so on that people would be getting and so on from these projects. But agriculture has a problem. It is on the decline. And the evidence of this is in the budget statement. And I want to quote here on page 55. The Minister of Finance said the following. Production data for the first 6 months of 2018 indicated a decline in the agriculture production compared to the same period in 2017. In fact, Mr. President, the volume of nutmegs fell by 26.9%, and the volume of the maize fell as much as 45.2%. Other crops purchased, Mr. President, by marketing boards fell by 7.8%. And no mention again in the budget was made as to how it is that the government is going to fix and correct this problem. Here in the budget theme, we are saying transforming our economy and building resilience. How do you plan to do this with the agriculture sector? Looking at the numbers and the figures in it. Again, the issue of really and truly building the resilience is not highlighted. And we want to point out, Mr. President, that the budget, the allocations for the Ministry of Agriculture, it seriously lacked in terms of the productive programs that would have been able to help boost production, because that is the problem. The government has identified the problem, but the programs and the projects that it has announced, they are not going to improve productivity in the sector. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. No mention was made of the Farm Labor Support Program. That is a program that can increase the output of production. In fact, I have here the GCNA, well, part of it, Mr. President, if you would allow, the GCNA report for nutmeg farmers. And in this report, it speaks about the importance or the heavy reliance of the Farm Labor Support Program and how it helped them to increase production. In fact, Mr. President, the financial period July 2017 to 2018, June 2018, shows that GCNA had a surplus of $1.4 million, and they would be paying the nutmeg farmers $1.1 million in bonus this year. So such a program has importance, and the question still remains, if we want to build resilience, because the importance of the agriculture sector is not just about business and green this and so on, It's for food security, production. That is where you need to place the emphasis. That is where you need to place the focus. We have not seen this with budget 2019, and we are concerned about that because, Mr. President, the real problem that we would be faced with is the question of the rise in the food import bill. And in 2017, the food import bill, according to the budget statement, was at $95 million. But in 2018, it has now moved to $111.6 million, a 17.5% increase. Imagine, Mr. President, the information we have received is that Grenada is now importing cattle. Grenada is now importing cattle. This is a time, Mr. President, when Carriacou used to be exporting peanuts. But imagine we have reached to the point where we are now importing cattle. So this is of concern to us. When we talk about resilience, we must really and truly show where we are being resilient in the budget. And I do not believe that the budget statement really and truly speaks about that. And might I say, Mr. President, I was very much disappointed that we did not receive any answers into the whole question of the marketing board investigation. And that is something for another time. But when you look at those things that is vital, that is needed to really push the production in the sector, again, it is lacking. Mr. President, the major areas of spending under the agriculture sector is in farm feeder road project and the climate smart agriculture program. We have no problems with that, Mr. President. But the government has cited that it has an issue with implementation deficits. The leader of government business, Mr. President, through you, is in fact the Minister of Climate Resilience. I believe that is something, that is a program that should have gone under his ministry. They have the technical capacity and the skills to deal with that. Look at the ministry, the makeup of the Ministry of Agriculture. You are concerned about implementation deficits. Look at the makeup of it. Who among there have the necessary skills to manage this project, to ensure that we get the resources and to ensure that we are going to push this project forward. Senator George, Mr. President, just said that young people would benefit. That is in isolation, because clearly and truly, it is still a speculation. You are not certain. You have raised the question of an implementation deficit. And to have this program under the Ministry of Agriculture really and truly is a mismatch. Again, the whole question of the feeder roads. We accept that. But, Mr. President, that would have best been fit under road construction or something other than that. 95 million of the $145 million allocated for the agriculture sector could have gone towards something more productive for the sector. So the government can build all the feeder roads that it wants. If it is not addressing the real issues with the sector and improving production, the agricultural sector will just remain in a decline. And this is what has been going on. So when we talk about it being beneficial to youth, the same young people that you're going to try to get involved, they will eventually become frustrated. Because as a farmer, I constantly hear the government saying to the farmer that they need to get better. But, Mr. President, a farmer is a farmer. A farmer cannot be a vendor. A farmer cannot be a businessman and manager. He has to focus on production. This is where the structures of society comes in. So, for example, you're announcing that you're going to have cooperatives and you're going to set up business centers. Would it have not been better to say, under the Ministry of Agriculture, that you're going to launch a cooperative among young people to start an agriculture business, right? Would it not have been better to say and project where this business should be in the next couple of years? That would have made more sense. So when we look at the agriculture sector, we remain disappointed. And there is no two ways about it. That is what is going on. And we must just be very honest about this and accept it for how we see it. Mr. President, I want to turn to some brief comments on the economy. And the issue of pension and gratuity, in my view, would fall squarely under there because we hear the conversations that is being had. Mr. President, regarding pension, as you know, this is a very serious issue. You yourself, Mr. President, did some work with Sir Paul Schoon on the matter, and you are aware of the implications or the need for pension and gratuity to be addressed, that issue. So, when we listened to the argument, and we've observed, we were not satisfied that this situation was handled in the right way. In fact, I want to say that both parties would have to receive some level of responsibility as to what went on. But from what I heard, I was very disappointed with the level of conversation that was being meted out by government to the unions. I want to place that on record. Because in my view, if you are asking someone to negotiate, you cannot put something on the table and then tell them to negotiate around that. We heard earlier on this morning Senator George, Mr. President, through you. She spoke about the constitutional arrangement in relation to pension. And she explained that, in fact, what the Constitution says is that you cannot negotiate something worse off than what is presently existing. Meaning, and government has said that nothing was existing. That is the argument in it, that the Pension Disqualification Act rule out any pension for public officers and that sort of conversation. That is what they have said. So when we look now at the situation, how this was handled, it was not handled in the right way. Mr. President, let us analyze. Government now is saying that the issue was never about the 25%. It was just about the modality of the payment and how to work that out and so on. But that could never be right. Because in the budget statement, right, you said the following. The minister said the following, Mr. President, and I want to quote. If the government were to accommodate any higher rate of gratuity than the 2%, the implications would be severe for the country. And he went on to speak about those implications being higher taxes, retrenchment, etc. So that was in the budget. Now we're hearing a different talk. I don't know what is causing it, what caused the change, but this is something that looks very suspicious. I hope that this was not an argument to create any sort of of moves and plans to go in a particular direction. I wouldn't mention it because I was just squeezed a minute ago, and I don't have time for that bantering. I need to get on with the people's business, so I wouldn't mention that. But I hope that is not the case. But the government's argument, in my view, needs to be relooked. I don't share the view, Mr. President, that we must talk about fiscal responsibility and we must stress and amend that when the workers are asking for an increase. But when it comes to objectives of programs, when it comes to how monies are being spent on programs, and if they are solving anything at all, nobody must ask any question there. We must spend the money there, but we can't pay that kind of wage, so you have to relax with that. I don't share that view. And one of the reasons why the issue of gratuity is so important to the workers is the fact that when a worker retires, and by the way, all the workers would not retire all at once. So this notion that it will cripple the economy, it will result in higher taxes, that is a myth. All the workers are not going to retire all at once. So there will be time, certainly, to prepare any level of payment to the workers. But the real issue is, when a worker retires, the whole question of that worker retiring into poverty is of great concern to the trade union movement. In fact, Mr. President, cost of living is high, and it has increased. In the budget statement, it identifies the inflation rate as 2.8%, close to 3%. And we have been, Mr. President, looking at some external figures as well, where we were analyzing at the level of the tourism sector the impact, not necessarily the impact, but how the spending power of visitors are being applied. And Mr. President, I have here a copy of a Florida Caribbean Cruise Association report. This was for the period 2017-2018 cruise year. And in fact, among the OECS, Grenada ranks the lowest in terms of spending power, meaning that you can't spend more money than $51.57. Every other island, Mr. President, is over that. In fact, two islands, St. Kitts and Nevis and St. Martin, they are about $135.95 and $142.23 respectively. So Grenada's cost of living is a burden. So when you ask a worker to retire, the concern the worker has is not whether or not it's going to cripple this project or cripple this program. You have to be fair. The concern of the worker is whether or not he or she will be in a position to manage after giving so much years of service in the public sector. That is the real question. So we want to put this into context because we hear a lot about advancing the social development. But you do not advance the social development by implying that you must remain where you are in terms of your economic status because the poor man can't get this or the poor woman can't get this. In other words, if you feed here will be lost. And we heard earlier on from Senator Roberts, Mr. President, through you, the question of the equitable distribution of the wealth. And why I want to speak about that now is very important because I want to take you to page 69 of the budget statement. Right? Government has said that if it seeks to pay the workers, the country will crash. Okay. We don't want to engage in that. We wouldn't like anything bad to happen. We would like for the government to survive. But, Mr. President, let's look at the numbers. Total tax revenue, right? We see a surplus there based on what I'm seeing here. Again, I'm a rookie in this, but I'm learning, right? So I want some clarity. I need people to say exactly what is going on because what I am reading here is very suspicious. So the tax revenue is seen a surplus, and that is because of the massive amount of taxes. That is on the revenue side. Only one area I would touch there. But on the expenditure side, the suspicious thing is that we seem to be seeing some level of saving or surplus on that side as well, right? And in fact, the primary balance after grants seems to suggest that we have $199.6 million in surplus. I could be wrong. That is close to $200 million. When the workers are asking for their monies, let's take into consideration, everybody is not going to retire all at once. So you would have to pay the people who did the service previous, and then you would have to pay the people coming now. We're talking workers who are there maybe in excess for 20 years. They have 20 more years to go before they retire. And we see this hysteria being stored, that if this happens, we will have higher taxes. If this happens, the economy will crash. We need to operate within the Fiscal Responsibility Act, and so on. But, Mr. President, this is a time when government is saying it is 10 years ahead of paying public debt, or it will be there in a number of years. So how then can the question arise that it cannot meet that, and we must negotiate something less? But as I said, when you base it on how the monies are allocated in terms of programs, which has no clear objectives, you are left to wonder. Now, we were told in the past that $30 million was around the figure what would have been budgeted to the, for the youth programs and so on in the past. We were told that. And, Mr. President, we hear that government has touted a figure of $24.1 million. I could be wrong, for the pension issue, if we go at the 25%. Now, I want to make it absolutely clear. I don't want to joke anything. I think it's good that the government and the union have both engaged now in renegotiations. I think it's good for the country. Again, it was a danger to the economy to have such a situation on the heels of Christmas, and I must commend all those involved for bringing about peace and goodwill to trying to get to a solution to this matter. But, Mr. President, let's go back, because we must be speaking factual when we talk here. I don't seem to understand what is stopping, right? I don't seem to understand what is stopping the government from seeking to engage in talking about a 25% gratuity. Because based on the numbers that we are seeing here, government has the ability. In fact, Mr. President, listen what the government wants the money for, based on what they explained. They said is to protect the country from any kind of hurricane and disaster and so on. Okay. But none of us, Mr. President, inside here, in this room, and even in government, are forecasters. We don't know when a hurricane would come. The point is, you cannot sit and wait and keep the money in holding while some of your people are retiring into poverty, and then you're telling them that you need to do this because we may get a hurricane next year and you don't know what could happen. We're going to need to spend the money there and so on. Mr. President, that's not an argument. That reminds me of the argument with the CCJ, that the Privy Council doesn't understand our culture and we need to go to the CCJ who is in line with our culture. Mr. President, that is not making any sense. I would watch my language because what I would say really and truly would not be pleasing. Again, Mr. President, in the area of the economy, we see here that the ease of doing business ranking, this was not addressed in the budget statement. We see another decline in the ease of doing business ranking. This is a time when government is beating its chest. The economy is doing so well, things are progressing, things are advancing, things are transforming. But the ease of doing business ranking, it has declined again. In fact, out of 190 countries, Grenada now ranks 147, the lowest it has ever been. Right? Let's put that into perspective. In 2017, the ease of doing business ranking was 142. And in 2018, it is now at 147. So we're going into the fiscal year 2019 with an ease of doing business ranking of 147. But it was promised by the Minister of Trade in 2015 that he would set up a committee to deal with this issue, to solve it. No mention of that was made again. We continue to see the decline. And, Mr. President, let's go further, because I want to address an issue that I keep hearing. Now, we are saying we are in a period where things are booming. We say that we're doing so good, we're doing so well. Government has indicated that we came from a period of over 40% unemployment. Mr. President, I could get up and press the mic and stand on a point of order too when they are saying that, but I don't have time for that. Because the truth is, there is no evidence to suggest what is being said. In fact, in 2013, the fiscal period in 2013, the unemployment rate was at 33.5%. When we left office, it was at 32.5%. So you had a 1% increase at the end of 2013 period, and we left in February of 2013. The unemployment rate never reached 40%. And this is so misleading and dishonest. This is why we are saying, when we analyze the budget, the government keeps making the claim that we're coming down from such a high unemployment and we're doing so much. This is not true. Because further to that, in 2017, the Central Statistical Office outlined that the labor force had in fact shrink. There was a shrinking of the labor force. So, in conducting the survey, in 2017, it conducted a survey of 1,300 plus households. And it suggested that the unemployment rate had decreased. But really and truly, it also mentioned that the labor force had shrunk, either due to migration, either due to other issues, either due to people leaving, certainly looking for the question of jobs. So when you analyze, Mr. President, the whole question about the economy is performing so well, unemployment is plummeting and so on, this really and truly, deeply, is not answered. The question of the rural economy, the youth unemployment in the rural economy. Again, we asked the question earlier, what is the relation between the Imani program and the youth unemployment? Government can answer that, because this is not outlined in 2019 budget statement. So when we look at what has been happening, we are not satisfied on that front. Mr. President, the question of the cost of energy in the country. We heard, and I want to commend the government, right? I'm a fair person. I want to commend the government that it reduced the corporate tax by 2%. That's good, right? But the businessman alone can't get ease, Mr. President. That is what the problem is. When the government came into office, government seek to restructure the economy. And it ensured that it paid off its local debt. This was something good, Mr. President. It put us in a better position. So we get rid of all the little debt. You have this small project man there and so on. You get rid of that. But, Mr. President, 5 years later in 2018, and during that time in 2013, you asked the workers to make the sacrifice. 5 years later in 2018, when you have millions of dollars in surplus, you still come and you give a 2% reduction in corporate tax. We have no problem with that, But again, the whole question of the equitable distribution of the wealth, where is that? Take, for example, the cost of energy in the country. Now, Mr. President, I want to just compare, if you will, the price for a liter of gas in the OECS, or at least among some countries in the Caribbean. Dominica, 2.35 per liter. St. Vincent, 3.13 per liter. Antigua, 3.10 per liter. St. Lucia, 3.07 per liter. Grenada, 3.51 per liter. And Grenada is the highest. But, Mr. President, let's look at a tax that we believe that the government could reduce to help increase business activity and to help ease the ordinary man, the poor man, the teacher, the nurse, the doctor. The question of the petrol tax, Mr. President. Now, if it is that Grenada is so advanced, in fact 10 years advanced in terms of the public debt and servicing it, etc., why it is that we can't see the need to give the relief efforts to where they would be best needed at this time? Because I want to go back to what the leader of government business said. He indicated that the need to be prudent and so on will be for all. All of us, this is something that all of us, the social compact and the trade unions, everybody was involved. And this is something for all of us to benefit. But when you really look at the measures that is being implemented, you are not seeing that sort of action. In other words, nice words. They sound good. But when you look at the action, it is not being applied. So, Mr. President, the question of the petrol tax, we are calling on the government to release that, reduce it. It is killing business activity. It is a major problem and reason why cost of living in the country is so high. This is one of the reasons why the workers are afraid to retire. Imagine you have a situation in Grenada, people rather walk and dead because they're afraid to retire. They have been expressing that. They went on the streets and marched and the government seek to dock pay. But on one end, we're hearing all the nice words about the teachers and they're doing this and that. But you're docking a pay just because they are standing for their rights, whether it was improper or not. And this is not the first time that rules have been broken in this country, and even by people in high offices. But whether or not it was improper, Mr. President, we want to say that the docking of the pays is not something that we encourage the government to do. In fact, if the government can, because we know they can, based on what we are seeing here with the surpluses, please return the monies to the workers for Christmas. Oh gosh. Oh gosh. Please. Because, Mr. President, I mean, it's very unfair. I don't need to go over that issue again because I think everybody seems to understand the importance of it. And we accept that things can happen. But as a responsible government, you ask the workers to make a sacrifice. They get frustrated based on the 2% offer that you offer them. They went out, they strike, they marched, they're fighting for their rights. And to remove pay as much as $1,000 in some instances, that is a lot of money. And at a time when the economy is not so well to the locals, it would have been fair not to do something like that. So, Mr. President, I want to move to the health sector. And the budget statement made pronouncement about national health insurance. Now, this is something that the National Democratic Congress certainly will endorse. We support the government in that move. We believe that it is important. But, Mr. President, the minister gives no indication of when the health insurance will commence, or even what does he really plan to achieve with health insurance in 2019. How will it be maintained? That has not been addressed. We just hear it announced. Is it, Mr. President, the question sustainable? Even the leader of government business admitted that earlier on this morning. So, in relation to that, we are not satisfied with what is being said. In fact, the minister announced that a human resource plan will be developed. I am thinking it's for the General Hospital, among other areas, and that Cabinet has approved this plan, right? In fact, it says that it's a human resource for health policy and plan for the health sector, a framework, Mr. President, for recruitment, professional development, and succession planning. That will be provided. Now, the problem is, given the situation in the health sector, can this plan solve the problems? No. No mention was made of the issues affecting nurses. In fact, we have heard 80 nurses have left the service as of this year. Government will have to confirm that. But the point is, nurses are leaving. What does the government plan to do to address the situation seriously? The nurses cited working conditions and the quality of pay as two main problems, what is causing them to seek greener pastures outside. What does the government plan to do to address that situation? Right? Nothing was made mention of that. In fact, Mr. President, we have an even bigger problem to which the government is aware about. Mr. President, babies are dying at our general hospital still. In fact, we've gotten reports of 3 more cases occurring more recently, at least one in the last 3-4 weeks. And there seemed to be no measure to address these situations. We hear of the training. We accept that. We believe that we need to see retraining. People need to have supervisory training, among other things, to be able to manage the health service. And that is on one side, where you would have equipment, medication, gloves, that sort of thing, right? So you need management for that. But on the other side to the general hospital, what is the government's initiative to improve the quality of health service currently being delivered to the people? We don't seem to see that. So while we hear the talk about national health insurance, from where we are at, Mr. President, is down granance. The issues of our babies dying in the general hospital is the no. It is at Mount Weldale. Government needs to find more creative ways to deal with that situation. So when we talk healthcare, we must not talk it in isolation, because then it does not make any sense. When you talk about you want to deliver cheaper and better healthcare, the question is, how are you going to do that? The 2019 budget did not make mention of that. So we would like to see, Mr. President, a more comprehensive approach to the health sector. Mr. President, we are concerned with the issue of the HPV vaccine for girls, young girls. I want to say that we believe that the government must proceed with caution. Some of the reports, and I'm talking now from a consumer standpoint, is that this vaccine actually causes and has serious side effects. So we just want to place that on record, that government must be very, very practical in how it goes about that and seek serious information before it proceeds. We are not going to say that if they should or should not, but government must seriously act responsibly, Mr. President, to ensure that it does not jeopardize the nation's children, in particular the young girls to which they say that this vaccine is for. Now, Mr. President, I want to move to the area of justice. And as you are aware, Grenada has no high court facility at this present time. And a home, rather, for the high court facility, or rather, Mr. President, a house of justice. We would have hoped that in Budget 2019, with all the surpluses and with all the other advancements that Grenada is making, that we would have seen that, stated. That government would have seek to get that up and running, that we could improve the situation. Because one of the indicators that fell in the ease of doing business ranking is the question of registration of new businesses. And this is directly related to the lack of a proper house of justice. So we must be very clear when we talk about advancing and transforming. It must make sense. It must be applicable. We must see these evidence of these words being practiced based on what we are seeing in the budget. So that is another area of concern. Under the question of social development, I want to say that we commend the government in moving in the direction of setting up and establishing a sex offenders registry. We think it's high time that this problem is dealt with in the country openly, and our people, our children, need some level of protection and safety. Also, the question of the Special Victims Unit. We support that move, and we think it's the right way to go. But we want to stress the need for more preventive measures as opposed to just responsive measures, just to publish a man name and them kind of things. In other words, Mr. President, we need to see more proactive measures. And I want to just inform this House that myself and Senator James, along with youth activist Earl Maitland, we started an initiative. We don't know how far it will reach. Let me just explain this initiative. It is an initiative to say the role of the schools, or the role, rather, that the schools can play in helping to reduce and combat the issue of child sexual abuse. Now, we have visited the Constantine Methodist School as the first school. On October 15th, we spoke to the assembly there. We engaged with the children, and we did some meaningful explanations, and we got them involved. They were doing presentations, among other things, as to the do's and don'ts, how you can protect yourself. We also, Mr. President, on October 24th, held a professional development session with the principal and the teachers there. And in fact, they gave some serious recommendations. This project certainly will be compiled in 2019, and I would be even willing to give a copy to the House. Because in that, there was one particular recommendation which they made that I believe the Ministry of Social Development must seek to incorporate in its whole plan. Because remember, Mr. President, sometime in July, I was sent to Trinidad and Tobago on state business, and we discussed the issue there of the whole question of child sexual abuse, and we made the pledge as opposition that we will cooperate with government to seek to do something about child sexual abuse. So I'm just reporting in that light, Mr. President. I believe that the Ministry of Social Development must seek to invest in training for teachers, specific teachers. This is opposed from counselors, because, Mr. President, I think we need to distinguish between a counselor and a teacher. When I was going to school, the counselor normally would be somebody foreign who come out from nowhere, but acting as a mediator. That is not the best approach. And in cases where you have children who or feeling vulnerable from child sexual abuse, just going to a counselor or a stranger may not always be the approach. Every child, Mr. President, has a favorite teacher. And what we want to do is, if there is a popular teacher that can be able to communicate, interact with the children, or even, Mr. President, find other children who can be the link between those who are being abused but do not want to speak about it, that is the sort of way or method that we believe it has to go. We would like to see, for example, training and education for teachers in the area of child sexual abuse. They must be able, Mr. President, to see and observe children. You have the whole question of STDs, STIs. You know specific things, Mr. President, that are related to that. They must be able to look and see if that child is exhibiting any sort of thing and be able to report this. In other words, Mr. President, what we are saying is that the schools, along with the community, must be more directly involved in investigating or even assisting to investigate or passing the information on to the relevant body so that problems and issues of child sexual abuse could be dealt with. So this is a project that we have started, and it is as a result of that visit that we held in Trinidad on state business. In fact, this house sent the opposition member, myself, to Trinidad, and we discussed the possibilities there. Certainly more projects like that on a community level would be rolled out, and we want to encourage the Ministry of Social Development, Mr. President, to go in that direction. Mr. President, on the issue of consumer affairs, and I heard the leader of government's business mention that consumers are spending and, you know, the economy is growing. Well, okay, we accept that. That's good. But in 2017, this Honorable House passed a legislation known as the Consumer Protection Legislation in 2017. We would have hoped that this passage would have been far gone in 2018. In fact, this is the ending of 2018, and we're going to 2019, and this act is really null and void. It's not being applied. In fact, we in the consumer movement express deep frustration, and we don't know the reason why it has been stalled. We would have liked to see that, you know, being at least rectified by now so that we could begin to see the benefits and the protection for consumers. Mr. President, in the area of water, right, I'm still under consumer affairs because I have a little concern. I did not see it being mentioned, but as Senator Roberts said, last night on news, I was looking at a news item which seemed to be talking about an issue of water, no, or lack thereof. We are not in the dry season. And any issue like that, Mr. President, I would hope normally would reside under the national, well, under NOWASA. What is the government's plan and program to really and truly improve, one, the quality. Thank you, Mr. President. What? What is the plan to improve the quality and, in fact, the volume of water in areas that may have troubles? So, for example, when you're looking at the situation with areas that have steep hills, the water that is coming from whichever source normally it is very difficult for it to climb. So we would have liked to see some sort of project or some sort of mention, Mr. President, of the establishment of a water board. Because let me tell you the benefits this could bring to the country just the same. The question of the quality of the water is important, and the need to preserve its source is also important. We have Glenegg, right here. We have Montpure, and we have Poli. Three waters being produced in Grenada. Their water source, Mr. President, could run out at any time, or it could be contaminated. But the need to protect these water sources, in my view, is very important. And the need also to enhance how water is delivered throughout the country is extremely important. So when we talk about building resilience, in our view, the question of how do we build resilience would be best answered, one, How do you improve the productive sector of the agriculture? How do you improve the productive capacity of the agriculture sector? 2, how do you protect your people from various illnesses? So, for example, in relation to pipe-borne illnesses coming from the water and its water source, how do you prevent that? We did not see any mention of that. And, Mr. President, I note that government often gets frustrated when we ask various questions. And I see, again, the response today from the leader of government's business, Mr. President, through you, when I raised the question of what is the objective and is it XYZ? Well, Mr. President, this kind of reaction is not going to help us solve the problems that we have. The reason why we raise these questions and concerns, the reason why this opposition now puts forward concrete solutions is for the benefit of the people. And if, in fact, you're answering questions, you're frustrated when you raise concerns, we're not imputing it. If you don't have the measure and the tolerance, Mr. President, how then can we move the conversation forward? How then can we build the country? How then can we advance the social development if you don't have the tolerance for what we are seeing? So, Mr. President, when we raise these concerns, I am often reminded that with great power comes great responsibility. Government ought not to react so. Government ought not to get on and try to use the House to silence me, because I would not be silenced by anyone. I would make that absolutely clear. I hear the rules of the House, and I respect it, but I know what is going on. So we have questions. In other words, we would have liked to see the money.
Please, nobody. Point of order, Mr. President. Nobody tried to silence anybody. The senator was imputing improper motive. He withdrew his statement, and that was the end of the conversation. So please, this... Yes. 35-5. That he's suggesting that we're trying to censor him and silence him. But the fact is, Mr. President, that the fact is that he had to withdraw the statement because there was... That he's suggesting that we are trying to silence him, and we have done no such thing. He's saying we did not silence him. It's not his opinion. He's accusing us of silencing him, and we have not done that. He made a statement that was improper. He withdrew it, and that was the end of it. But he is bringing that back now to impute that this House, because we have all of the seats, we have all of the power, which... That was a statement that was made, Mr. President.
No one shall silence him in this House.
As we had tried to silence him.
You are linking what he said earlier. We better get on to it.
Let me get on.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, in the area of Carriacou and Petite Martinique, we would have liked to see the issue of the Harveyville port be discussed in a way that would have benefited the businessmen and women in the surrounding areas. In fact, they have expressed to me that they are concerned that the moving of the port will increase, some of them, in relation to their business, the transportation cost of goods. So they believe that a more inclusive approach, dialogue, the question of dialogue with the people, they believe that that should have occurred before going to that road, and at least seeking to keep the existing port so as to facilitate or help with the offset of the moving of the port to Harveyville. Mr. President, still on Carriacou and Petite Martinique, the whole question of the Dumfries Airport. Recently, the Prime Minister would have made a statement at his convention or General Council, one of the two, about the Dumfries Airport, but no mention in the budget, we don't seem to find that anywhere, was made of if they will pursue that. I think the people of Carriacou and Petite Martinique, Mr. President, really and truly needs to be given more attention. Even the whole question on the capital side of Carriacou and Petite Martinique, coming from grant fundings, I don't really see the urgency and the government putting and applying the interest and importance on Carriacou and Petite Martinique and its whole question of its development. As I mentioned earlier, this is a time when Carriacou and Petite Martinique used to be exporting peanuts, watermelons, and that sort of thing. So the whole question of the agriculture sector and how it would link to Carriacou and Petite Martinique, really and truly, I would have liked to see more creative plans going there. The issue of tourism replacing the agriculture product in that community, I think that is a concern. And let me tell you why I see that. I see the need more of, and I hear the discussions, I'm not imputing, but I hear the discussions that new hotels and so on would be going to Carriacou and Petite Martinique. I would rather see Carriacou and Petite Martinique seeking to go back to where they were more progressive, meaning in the area of production, agricultural production. In fact, cotton, all these other areas. I would have really liked to see that. Mr. President, Carriacou is a place that I visit regularly. In fact, Senator Judd always accused me, say anytime something important comes up, I always have to go to Carriacou. But the truth about that is that Carriacou is like another home. And the people, the mood there, it is prime for business activity. And the need for government to invest the resources there, I think that cannot be understated. If we are talking building resilience, in addition, Carriacou and Petite Martinique is not a stranger to Grenada, and we must invest the monies there as well. Mr. President, lastly, as I conclude, I want to say that no mentions were made of oil and gas, even though in the throne speech we heard pronouncement of it being an important sector to transform the economy, part in the theme which the government used. We heard no mention of it, really and truly. And again, our question was left unanswered, so we don't know what is taking place there. But we are a bit concerned, and we would like to know what does Grenada stand to benefit. So, Mr. President, all in all, as I conclude, we believe that leadership is being replaced by popularity. We also believe, Mr. President, that principles has been substituted for funny practices. Slogans, Mr. President, we believe are being offered in place of programs. Because again, as I highlighted, we don't seem to have a clear objective. What does the Imani program seek to address? And Mr. President, when we look at the whole question of genuine public service to the people, that has been replaced, Mr. President, by public relations. In fact, the Minister of Information, Mr. President, as I end, would have made a statement through you, would have made a statement on a program that government will seek to hire marketing officers for the various ministries. Again, at a time when we are talking about fiscal discipline, fiscal responsibility, to seek to go that route, in my view, will not be the best thing to be applied. The various ministries, they already have PROs or PR officers, and I do not believe that a ministry requires at this time a marketing officer. We are against that. We want to stress that. And if government have any excess resources to hire anybody, it must be in a meaningful sector where we can see the improvement of production, among other things. Mr. President, thank you very much. God bless Grenada.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Mr. President, I rise to give my full support to the motion that is before this Honorable House. The motion in support for the estimates of revenue and expenditure for 2019 as presented by the leader of government business, and also the Prime Minister in that other place. Mr. President, the theme for our 2019 budget is one that even with some persons not even happy about it, still can't even change it. That's to tell you how resilient that team is, Mr. President. Mr. President, this 2019 budget speaks more to fiscal performance in our economy, but I believe it speaks more towards indicating a vision, a purpose, and a plan for the future of this country, Mr. President. Purposeful planning, Mr. President, that captures and harnesses significant areas of opportunities for our country, but also inoculates potential threats through the application of strategic actions, significant investments, and adoption of best practices. Mr. President, I want to take this opportunity before I go forward to recognize the importance of this House and the opportunity this House affords each and every member. And I was very much pleased, Mr. President, with and impressed with the presentation and the handling of my fellow colleague, Senator Cadet. And as the Minister responsible for youth, it makes me very proud to see how our young people in this honorable place is performing, Mr. President. I'm really impressed. I cannot put myself too much in the young bracket because I recognize a few little gray hairs start popping up. So I'm right at the outskirts, Mr. President. I wish to take this opportunity to start on the stewardship of the Ministry of Youth Development, Sports, Culture, and the Arts by focusing on the portfolio of youth. Mr. President, so much has been said today about our young people. Some good, some not so good. But Mr. President, I am very comforted when you hear somebody says that the plans and programs that you have for them sounds very cool. I think that speaks volumes. But also, it gives me an opportunity to continue to focus on those plans for young people. But when I hear, Mr. President, that our investment in for young persons, in particular through the New Imani program, is an investment in sinking sand, I do not feel comfortable, and I'm certain that our young people listening out there would not feel comfortable to know that an investment in their development, creating opportunities for them, is one that is seen as being made on sinking sand. Mr. President, in focusing on the youth portfolio and the ministry, I want to focus on three strategic outcome areas. Looking at the empowering of young people, health and excellence through sports, and enhancements and preservation of Grenada's cultural expression. Mr. Speaker, the New Imani program. This program we have heard for a number of times, over and over, persons not understanding the impact of engaging young people. Mr. President, when I went at the Youth Awards and a graduation of the recent Imani trainees, I was so moved, and not just myself. I saw persons almost to tears, Mr. President, when I heard the testimonies the opportunities that this program, the impact that this program is making on the lives of our people. And yet for all, some people are still lost in terms of what is the objective of this program. Mr. President, this program does not just give an opportunity for young people. It creates a new path, a new direction for our young people. Mr. President, when some of our young people believe that all was lost, the new Imani program created a new vision, a new hope for them. Mr. President, currently we have approximately 3,800 young persons engaged in the new Imani program. Without the new Imani program, where would these 3,000 young persons be today? I think that is the question that I believe that my dear colleague, Senator Redhead on the other side, must ask himself. Where would they be today? Mr. President, the new Imani program, we continue to improve, make improvements to the program. And because we realize the demand that we have from our young persons in the program and the benefit that the businesses or business partners have been deriving from the trainees placed at their business place, we saw it fit to engage in a cost-sharing initiative. It's an equal investment in the development of our young people. We are giving our corporate citizens an opportunity to invest in our young people through a cost-sharing measure. Mr. President, in September, just before September, we only had 7 businesses, 7 corporate citizens partaking in this cost-sharing measure. Between September and October of this year, 2018, Mr. President, that has moved from 7 to 42 businesses, 42 corporate citizens investing in the new Imani program in the 50-50, and we continue to engage more. Mr. President, we're talking figures. Since between January and September of 2018, in excess of 447 persons gained permanent employment, not with government, permanent employment in the business sector, in the private sector, Mr. President, from the new Imani program. So I hope those transition figures are quite satisfactory. And persons don't believe that we are just having persons in our program just rolling around. Mr. President, we have a total of 406 trainees who were placed in job apprenticeship as well, Mr. President. Currently, we have over 105 trainees currently under the scholarship component of the new Imani program. That is what the new Imani program does. We are just placing people to do training. We're giving them opportunity in terms of scholarship, Mr. President. This is what we do with the new Imani program. Mr. President, the Empower program. This program, Mr. President, and I am somewhat surprised that my dear colleague senator on the other side is not fully aware of what is taking place with our young men in this country, not only in this country, in the region. When you go to a classroom, Mr. President, and you look around, you barely see our males there. When you go to any UE exam hall, I'm certain that you can count the amount of males on one hand. Mr. President, our young men is at risk. They are at risk. And that is the reason why we are working with them through the Empower program. To give them an opportunity, Mr. President, to bring them back Mr. President, if you hear the testimonies, I believe that maybe going forward, in through our presentation, I should be given an opportunity to play some of the testimonies, the audio and video testimonies, as part of my presentation. Maybe, Mr. President, that is something that the Clerk of the Parliament may have to look at going forward. Mr. President, the Empower program this year, we have a special component, a new component that we are implementing, which we call Spice Beat. This component is going to allow our young men who have the love and the passion for getting involved in music, music production, music writing, reading music, Mr. President. We are coupling every aspect of our sector, be it sports, be it culture, to ensure that our young people benefit. So this is what these 500 young males are going to be doing. They're going to be getting an opportunity to express themselves through the Empower program. Manpower, that is what this is about. We hear so often about our women and they're being left behind. But, Mr. President, I think the roles are basically reversed right now. Our men is seriously under threat. It is something that, not just as government alone, but we hope that the corporate citizens can assist in that regard. Mr. President, our youths are so important. If we're to build a country and have a strong future, we must look to our young people. And through sports, Mr. President, our young persons continue to make our country proud day by day. Mr. President, we see the glowing achievements of our own Lyndon Victor at the Commonwealth Games, Mr. President. We believe, in terms of prospect for our 2020 Olympics, we believe that he has an excellent opportunity to medal and to raise Grenada's achievement higher. Not just himself, but also his brother, Kurt Felix. We're also looking at Anderson Peters, Mr. President, as a strong prospect in ensuring that Grenada shines, also at the World Championships next year and Olympics in 2020. Mr. President, these young ambassadors have done well for Grenada. They continue to represent us, and we wish them well. I understand that both Lyndon and Kurt will be home on Monday. They're coming to spend the holidays with us, and we welcome them. We look forward to seeing them and engaging them. However, Mr. President, we recognize that our athletes overseas do have a number of challenges. And we are continuing to have that conversation with them to ensure that we put the necessary measures in place to give them the support. And we want to commend the business sector in this regard, a number of them who came on board to give the support to the athletes as well in supporting their preparation for Olympics. And we are doing everything that we can to give them that support, Mr. President. Mr. President, we also want to inform this Honorable House and record in this Honorable House the achievements of Damian Daniel. Mr. President, when you hear the story of this young man who lost his parents at both parents at a young age, and he is our #1 bodybuilder. And you know what he said to me, Mr. President? You know, I was so moved that he became a bodybuilder not because he had loved it, because of the trauma of the loss of his parents. He dealt with it by lifting heavy weight. That was his therapy. And today, he is our most outstanding bodybuilder. I think this is something that we... Yes. So he placed first at the CAC Games in Mexico, and that has moved him to professional status. He's currently preparing for a tournament in March. We wish him all the best. Mr. President, this is what the Ministry of Youth Development, Sports and Culture do. We invest in our people, our young people. That is the rock. That is the bedrock of our future, Mr. President, not sinking sand. Mr. President, Deron Felix became our first swimmer for Grenada to qualify for Youth Olympics. That is a mammoth achievement, and we want to congratulate him and his family, and also the Grenada Amateur Swimming Association, Mr. President. And we are working closely with them. They are on a path to ensure that we continue moving towards ensuring the establishment of an aquatic facility for swimmers here in Grenada, Mr. President. Mr. President, our athletes, we once again, for the 8th consecutive time, won the Winlot CBN Games in St. Lucia. We have been doing outstanding in that area, and we want to commend all involved in that activity and initiative and achievement. Mr. President, our under-15 girls, football Spice Girls, they played unbeaten to the finals in the CONCACAF Under-15 Girls Championship held in Florida, and we lost in the finals, Mr. President. They were outstanding, and we want to recognize their performance as well. Mr. President, our national netball team, we have our leader right here, lead the girls to bronze at the INF Netball World Cup qualifying Barbados, and we want to congratulate them. Mr. President, the honorable member, I know from time to time she calls me seeking support in every way possible. And I just want to see here at this point in time that we are moving towards creating a better opportunity, not just for netball, but also for basketball. Our young basketball players, they are doing very well, and we continue to support them. And just recently, Cabinet had commissioned a subcommittee that will plan towards seeing how we can establish an indoor facility for all sports, be it netball, basketball, volleyball, for Grenada going forward. And we expect a report back to Cabinet within 6 months as to how we can achieve this, be it for funding, area, the concept for that. And just to inform this Honorable House that Honorable Glennis Roberts is the person who will be leading that subcommittee, chairing that committee, to ensure we get that facility. Mr. President, our swimmers again for the 4th consecutive year, we had the OECS Swimming Championships. 15 records were broken at that meet, Mr. President. I think that is outstanding. That is outstanding. Mr. President, we have our young Sherman Lewis making the West Indies senior men's cricket team as a fast bowler. I can resonate with that, Mr. President. As a fast bowler, the pride and joy of running up and delivering in excess of 90 miles an hour, and in some cases breaking our stumps. I know how wonderful that feeling is. I can certainly get you out saying that, Garvey. Don't worry. Mr. President, our national under-15 cricket team, they are set to head to St. Lucia. They're the defending champions for the OECS, the Winner Islands, under-15 championship. They'll be leaving on Sunday, Mr. President. These young guys, they are so amazing. And I do hope to actually join them sometime on Thursday evening, just to have a chit-chat with them, Mr. President, just to motivate them as they get ready to go and defend the title. And we believe that they will return victorious. And just to add, Mr. President, 2 young players from Carriacou are members of that team, young Kellis Andrews and Desron Williams. We really want to commend. They are spin bowlers. We want to commend Kiaraku for having such a good product and to be part of the national team. So we want to commend them as well. Mr. President, while we're in Kiaraku, the Ministry of Youth Development and Sports, we continue to work towards investing and development of sports in Kiaraku. And we have just procured a stone roller, a compactor for the preparation of pitches in Kiaraku. And that roller should be here in Grenada sometime late February, early March. Mr. President, other sporting gears as well to support the development of sports and athletics in Kiaraku, Mr. President. Mr. President, our women cricketers, Mr. President, we must be proud of our young Afi Fletcher. She's representing the Speyside and the West Indies women's squad. Mr. President, most importantly, sometime earlier in this year, we had the Winner Island Volcanoes moving their headquarters to Grenada. Mr. President, a number of positive initiatives have evolved from that. To date, Mr. President, a number of our local players have received a full contract with the Volcanoes. We have Roland Cato, or Devon Smith, Sherman Lewis, Dennis Smith, and Josh Thomas, Mr. President, they are contracted by Volcanoes. Mr. President, this move, we believe, is one that is significant for Grenada, significant for the development of cricket in Grenada, having the Volcanoes have their headquarters here, the coaching staff, the skills and the resources that is afforded to our cricketers in Grenada, I believe is wonderful, and we are taking full advantage of that. Also, Mr. President, Ryan John, he's selected to play with the Volcanoes. He's not under contract, but he has, every time he plays, he gets paid for playing, but he's not under full contract. Also, Junior Murray, our renowned cricketer and cricket ambassador, he's also engaged as a fitness coach with the Volcanoes, Mr. President. Mr. President, what we're seeing here is a number of engagements, a number of economic opportunities and development opportunities our young persons are getting through the presence of the Volcanoes here in Grenada, Mr. President. I think that is significant. We have 6 other players who are actually training, local players, who are actually training along with the Volcanoes team. We believe that this is an invaluable investment in our young people and cricketers. Mr. President, our young Emmanuel Stewart, he played for the Volcanoes in the West Indies Super 50 tournament as well. He's not under contract because he's currently studying at K-Ville campus in Barbados. As such, it doesn't allow him to be contracted, but I'm certain as soon as he's free, I know that he will definitely be a top contender to be contracted. Mr. President, in 2019, we are going to see cricket, international cricket here. Plans are well underway to ensure that the games run successfully. Cricket is to be played between West Indies and England on the 25th and 27th. So that week, we expect Grenada to be buzzing in terms of activities, and also a number of visitors from England who will be here supporting the English team. Mr. President, they have indicated how much they love being in Grenada, and they have asked that to ensure that their game, Grenada versus West Indies, that we get a couple of games in Grenada between their team, just to ensure that they come and enjoy the beautiful ambience and the safety that we have here as a people in Grenada. So we're working towards having a successful ICC International Cricket One-Day Tournament come 2019, Mr. President. Mr. President, just to indicate, government is making significant investment to ensure that these games happen. We believe that this is important, that we do that because of the economic impact that these events bring to our shores. Mr. President, the culture and arts. Mr. President, this is an area that has immense potential for our country. And I want to start with our biggest product, our biggest cultural product, which is our Spice Mass. We had a successful 2018 Carnival, Mr. President. We saw a successful hosting of Panorama. I know that we had some challenges in that area in hosting that event, and we are still working. As you know, one of the biggest challenges with Spice Mass is because we have a diverse stakeholder composition, and different persons have different needs, different passion, different challenges, Mr. President. As such, sometimes it's very difficult to resolve some of those issues. But we saw a successful hosting of Spice Mass 2018. And Mr. President, the outlook for 2019 is looking excellent. We have a number of bookings have already been made. Currently, we have calls from Trinidad asking to meet with us to plan for their trip to Grenada. We have calls from Canada, UK, United States. Mr. President, we really want to commend the Greater Tourism Authority, who is our significant partner, strategic partner, in ensuring that Spice Mass is marketed throughout the world. We want to thank them for the support in that regard. Mr. President, we continue to give support to the development side of culture. We had a Take It to the Streets dance competition. This was the first time experiencing, not just as the Minister responsible for culture, but experiencing that activity for the first time. Mr. President, it's amazing the amount of talent that our young people had, and they came out and they displayed it well. It was a wonderful event. I was so happy, Mr. President, to see that. We also had a hip-hop workshop. We had a calypso workshop, Mr. President, and also a drum corps and a patois workshop, Mr. President. Mr. President, I'm happy to announce that the National School Orchestra, which performed here at the opening of the Parliament, we are currently in receipt of a number of instruments from Roy Kipp. I know most people might hear Roy Kipp and the band, that band from Trinidad, and they play all over the world. He has graciously donated a number of instruments, trumpet, flutes, drums, to Grenada for our school orchestra program. And the instruments are here in Grenada, and we will have an official handing over ceremony as soon as he's available to come to Grenada to do that himself. Mr. President, we think that is wonderful, and we really want to commend Roy Kipp, and also to recognize Troy Garvey, who is his point man here on the ground, who we've been working with to ensure that this happens. So this is wonderful news for the development of culture, Mr. President. Mr. President, recently reconstituted the Carriacou Festival Board, and not just reconstituted, we also had some training and capacity building for the board to ensure that Carriacou culture is significantly harnessed. We recently had a new festival being launched in Carriacou again, and that has to do with the arts, the visual arts, and also the young authors in Carriacou. I think it was a wonderful initiative, which is called Kia in the Bagade. It's our kind of patois term for most persons may not capture it. Some of the younger folks may not grasp it, but it was a wonderful initiative, and we really want to commend them. Mr. President, Carriacou has an immense potential in terms of culture, and we are going to do everything to ensure that we harness it properly to create economic activity for Carriacouans alike. And we believe that the Festival Board, as an institution, will be the nucleus for us to unlock that potential for development of culture in Carriacou. Mr. President, Festival of the Arts, and Thursday would be the finals of the Festival of the Arts. I do not know how long we'll be here on Thursday as the minister responsible for culture. I don't know if I'll even make it on time. That would depend on how we configure our presentations between now and Thursday. Festival of the Arts, Mr. President, is one of the biggest events that we see happening, and we really want to thank all involved, in particular our schools, our teachers who work well with our students to ensure that they help them to realize their potential and their passion for the arts, singing, dancing, drama, Mr. President. Mr. President, currently we are working on establishing music labs in secondary schools. We are just about to commission our first lab at the MacDonald College, first music lab at the MacDonald College, and we are seeking to establish another in 2019 at the St. Joseph Convent, Grenville. Mr. President, we believe that if we take that facility to our students, have it at the fingertips, that will help them to continue to develop in where they are. And just as how we had our young chap Jamaican chap, make it the X factor. We believe that these initiatives will help our young persons to realize their full potential in the area of the culture, Mr. President. The Simon Cultural Development Center, Mr. President, as was mentioned earlier on, we have commenced our work. We have demolished the ruins on the old site. The next activity will be to survey the area and to fence and to commence with construction in 2019, Mr. President. Mr. President, as Minister responsible for youth, sports, and culture, the National Lotteries falls under my responsibility, Mr. President. And the National Lottery, together with our strategic partner, development partner, certainly, Mr. President, we believe that that is something that is quite important for Grenada, because it will be the nucleus for Grenada. In terms of the concept, a number of discussions have already been had on it, and we are certainly going to have more before it is finalized. And normally, what happens is that all stakeholders, we give them an opportunity to make contributions in that regard. And because it's a center would have not just for performances, but also for training and development, it means that we have to take that concept to a wider cross-section. But certainly, Mr. President, it will be available for public consumption and for feedback, Mr. President. Thanks for inquiry.
This regard, there are many artistic people out there, highly talented, many of them very qualified. I think a thing like that should engage.
Duly noted, Mr. President. As indicated earlier, because of technology, we are basically home and abroad while home, Mr. President. So we are definitely going to take that into consideration. Thank you very much for your guidance on that. Yes, Mr. President, I was saying National Lottery and Caribbean Banknote, CBN, there is a charity fund that is established for national development initiatives. Mr. President, we are happy to inform this Honorable House, through this fund, 2 brand new ambulances have been procured towards the health sector and for national development. The ambulances are currently in Grenada, Mr. President, and they're being wrapped, and there'll be a formal handover very soon, hopefully before the end of this year, Mr. President. Mr. President, just to add, one of the new ambulances will definitely be going to Carriacou for the Princess Royal Hospital, Mr. President. Mr. President, this charitable fund is one that is critical in terms of important initiatives. And what we are doing is that we are going to be looking at critical areas where needs are required, like, for example, in the area of firefighting as well, to provide support in that area going forward, Mr. President. So you're going to see more action coming from this important development fund. Mr. President, for 2019, we have some critical areas that we're looking at. And some of it has been mentioned, and I'm happy to offer some clarity and to give some more details on those critical transformative initiatives for 2019. And Mr. President, in the interest of time, I'll just mention 3 significant ones. And the first one being the Youth Enterprise Initiative. Mr. President, we'll see a rebranding of this initiative from Youth Enterprise, Greater Youth Enterprise, to Youth Biz, meaning youth small business, Mr. President. Mr. President, this is an effort to give young persons an opportunity to whatever ideas that they have, to create that avenue, that environment for them to explore and also to unleash those business initiatives, Mr. President. It is our aim, Mr. President, to establish 3 business support centers. One is going to be within the St. David's area, and one is going to be within on the western corridor, be it St. John, St. Max, and one is going to be in Carriacou, Mr. President. Mr. President, so I do hope, I know that some calls were made earlier on as to where this is going to be, as if it's going to be like a pie in the sky initiative. But I'm telling Mr. President, this is a critical initiative. These centers will provide business idea development opportunities for persons who have an idea. You can go to the centers and we will have a professional person there to help you develop your business idea. Also to provide marketing support. If you have an existing business and it may need it to expand some more, you can go there to get support in terms of marketing and also access to finance. If you want to expand, start a new business, that also will be available at those centers, and also business management support to help you to sustain your business going forward. So these are the main components of the Business Support Center, Mr. President. We believe that this is something that is timely, we believe something that is important and critical to provide support for young persons, Mr. President. Mr. President, special focus has been placed on the implementation of the Youth in Agriculture program, Mr. President, in collaboration with the Ministry of Agriculture. Mr. President, this program is a very strategic program, and I'm happy to give some more information on it, because you see, having a strong agriculture background, Mr. President, that is my area of competencies. I understand what is taking place in the agriculture sector, and that we have to pay attention what is taking place in our marketplaces. Now, while a number of persons are comfortable with what used to happen in the past, cotton, lime, Mr. President, those things, you have to pay attention to your trends and your markets. If you don't do that, you're going to get left behind. And that is one of the reasons why those initiatives in places like back in the past in Carriacou with lime and cotton, that is why they all fail. Because you cannot continue doing the same thing over and over and expect different results. It just doesn't happen in this business. You have to pay attention to markets, you have to pay attention to trends, and you have to pay attention to what is taking place on the ground. Now we realize, Mr. President, that the demographics of our farming community there is a vast space between the young and the not so young. Mr. President, and we recognize that a number of our young persons, for one reason or the other, do not have an inclination for wanting to get involved. And it's all because of how the sector has been portrayed. But Mr. President, I can tell you, the agriculture sector bears significant value in terms of making a living if it is done right, if it is marketed right. And the Youth in Agriculture initiative, Mr. President, is to help our young persons see, first of all, the benefit by investing in agriculture, the benefit by looking at agriculture as an area for a career. And that is what we're trying to do, Mr. President. We cannot sit by and not do something, because what you find happening and what we see happening in terms of the trends, and which has been mentioned here, is that imports are increasing. And the reason why imports are increasing is because of a strong economy in terms of economic activity, people have more spending power, and the demand for goods and services are increasing. And if you are not prepared to take advantage of those opportunities, then you will find yourself having persons, not just only goods coming in, but maybe even farmers coming in. That may happen next. Mr. President, when I see a message come on my cell phone saying that creative design, looking for carpenters, plumbers, any among it open, that tells you something, Mr. President. It tells you the demand for jobs and skilled jobs is very high, and which means that we have work to do. And if we do not pay attention to those indicators, we will be under serious threat in terms of those jobs opportunities. Mr. President, we just had the commission of Silver Sands, and the Department of Labor can tell you the amount of work permits that had to be granted for specialized persons to come in. Those are opportunities that we missed out on. So, Mr. President, it is within that context that the Youth in Agriculture project is being constructed, Mr. President. Mr. President, the project will be focusing on agribusiness training and certification. It will give you an opportunity to certify yourself, certify whatever business you have, be it in agro-processing, whatever the issue is. Mr. President, we will be looking at youth entrepreneurship and microfinancing. The program will be focusing on that. Market access for young farmers, Mr. President. Agro-processing, agriculture extension services. We believe through this project, we can develop a new crop of young extension farmers. I know that the member representing the farmers here this evening, that is an area of concern for him. The extension work, the technical capacity, that support can be done through the youth agriculture program. Access to agricultural lands, climate smart agriculture, Mr. President. A National Young Farmers Association, Mr. President. These are also a National Young Farmers Festival. We give them an opportunity to display their products and production initiatives, Mr. President. So these are the main thematic areas in which the Youth in Agriculture program is going to be focusing on. Mr. President, youth-based cooperatives. I think it's very important that I pay some attention to that, Mr. President. This is a very transformative initiative that we're looking at. Mr. President, we do have a number of young persons leaving school every year. I think approximately 2,000. And that is a challenge for government. This government and any government, be it in Grenada, be it in St. Vincent, be it in St. Lucia. Our kids are leaving school every year. And we have a responsibility to find something meaningful for them to be engaging. And so sometimes persons think by just waving a magic wand, all that is going to be solved just like that. Those are real challenges and real issues. And what we are looking at, Mr. President, is by engaging our young persons and encouraging them to get involved in youth cooperatives. They can take advantage of opportunities in garment production. We have a number of persons here with skills in terms of design, Mr. President. Fashion designers. This will give them an opportunity to maximize their idea, the business idea, and to make that business a reality through garment production. Also cooperatives in agriculture, which I mentioned earlier on. We have challenges, Mr. President, in terms of services. And our services sector is coming under serious pressure in demands for persons in that area. These cooperatives can function as dietary aids at our hospitals and provide skilled services. Why can't we provide those services through our young persons, Mr. President? I think this is an opportunity for that. Our geriatric services, our young persons can. We have our senior citizens in the twilight age, through our cooperative, can provide the necessary services in that regard, Mr. President. I think these are new and transformative initiatives that we should adopt. Different initiatives, and not just the traditional way, but looking at contemporary ways in which persons can gain a meaningful employment. This is what we seek to do, Mr. President, in terms of transforming this economy. Mr. President, in sports, we're focusing in 2019 on community, at a sports program at the community level, at the grassroots level. Going in the communities, actually going there to pick out, to see, and to interact with persons who have the real potential. Not just in schools, but within the community. We believe that is critical, and so we're focusing on community sports development, Mr. President. Mr. President, our national sports policy. We currently have a draft policy, and the ministry is working with all our stakeholders to ensure that we have this policy finalized in 2019 for implementation. Mr. President, I am very encouraged, and I want to take this opportunity, Mr. President, to speak a little bit about agriculture, Mr. President. So much has been said about agriculture. In the interest of time, Mr. President, I will speak to a few things highlighted by our dear colleague, Senator Redhead. And the first one has to do with agriculture is declining. Mr. President, before one can confirm and say that something is declining, there must be a pattern developed over a period of time in climate change terms. They say 30 years. If something is declining for 30 years, then you can confirm and say that is declining. I'm not even going that far. I'm quite certain in the past decade, agriculture is not on the decline. It has been going up and has been going down. And those movements is relative to our weather conditions, climate change activity. Hence the reason why we have the AgriCom project, Climate Smart project, to address those challenges that we face with. Mr. President, this year we have received rainfall less than normal. And that is a challenge. What can you do about that? But it's quite unfortunate that sometimes when you're planning and you're looking ahead, some persons think that that is not wisdom, because you ain't know when you're going to die, so you shouldn't plan ahead. I don't know, but we'll get to that in a while, Mr. President. Mr. President, the farm labor program. I know mention was made of the farm labor program. And I think I want to just touch on it a little. And also, investment in rural communities. Mr. President, currently, the Greater Cane Company, who is investing significantly in excess of $6.3 million in the rural community in Greater, Mr. President, I want to commend Cane Co. They have provided employment for 90 persons, and they have in their possession in excess of 200 acres, Mr. President. Mr. President, they are working on setting up a distillery in St. Andrews. In excess of $10 million will be spent on that facility. Mr. President, this is a significant investment in our rural economy. Mr. President. Mr. President, we continue to improve the capacity of our extension officers. We continue to give training, Mr. President, and associate degree training was done for 20 extension extension officers, assistant to extension officers in associate degree at TAMCC at a cost of $42,000 US, Mr. President. We are investing in our agriculture sector. Mr. President, we had 19 training sessions conducted over the past year for our farmers. Over 459 farmers received training in various areas in pest and disease management, root crop production, vegetable production, tree establishment and management. Mr. President, we think that is significant. Mr. President, we continue to work with the security forces in trying to curb the adverse effects of predial larceny. That is a significant cost to our farmers, Mr. President, and we continue to invest. We have, government has allocated $300,000 to address that in 2019, Mr. President. Mr. President, the Farm Labor Support Program. My colleague on the other side indicated that he didn't hear anything about the Farm Labor Support Program. I'm very happy to inform him and this Honorable House, Mr. President, that the government of Grenada, through the Ministry of Agriculture, spent $130,500 on the Farm Labor Support Program in rural communities for 2018. 100 farmers were assisted, 79 acres of tree crops established, and 182 persons obtained short-term employment. Mr. President, I hope this is satisfactory for my dear colleague in terms of the impact of the Farm Labor Support Program, which continue to be critical in terms of the development of agriculture. Mr. President, we live in a time where climate is real, climate change is real. And currently, we are challenged in terms of providing support to our agriculture farmers. As you know, agriculture is a business that is highly volatile. As such, our commercial banks, they are not too welcoming in giving financial support for agricultural developments. Not very easy unless you have significant security, Mr. President. As such, as government, we recognize an area of weakness and we try to provide the support for farmers. Mr. President, and so the Cabinet has approved a payment of over $200,000, Mr. President, for affected farmers from the terrestrial rains that we had in August, Mr. President. We believe that it's important that we give that necessary support as we work towards establishing a vulnerability fund and agricultural risk insurance together with FAO, which we are going to do some work on in 2019. So while in the absence of this fund, Mr. President, we are providing support for the farmers by way of financial support for the damages and loss that they had from the rains in August, Mr. President. We think that is important and that is significant. That is support to our farmers. Mr. President, agriculture is very important to Grenada. And we have been working with both the GCNA and the Grenada Cocoa Association and working towards having those both associations come together to merge their services, put their resources together, and for them to become a stronger entity and to operate more efficiently. Mr. President, a number of engagements have been made in that regard to ensure that both associations continue to thrive and thrive successfully because they are looking after an important constituent, the farming community, Mr. President. Mr. President, the government of Grenada, in support to the Grenada Cocoa Association, provided a loan, Mr. President, of $3.5 million to support that association as they were having some challenges, some difficulties, Mr. President. And so sometimes when I hear that government is not using its fund wisely and not supporting agriculture, Mr. President, I am somewhat baffled when I know the significant investment that we are making in our farmers to ensure that they continue to strive and strive successfully, Mr. President. Mr. President, I want to say a little bit about agriculture in Carriacou while I'm on agriculture. And mention was made as to why we can't go back to some of those days when we had those crops. Mr. President, I would not fault my colleague senator for thinking and wanting to go back to that age. But, Mr. President, a lot has changed. And the world is dynamic. And what we find happening now, Mr. President, a lot of the areas that were primary agricultural lands in Carriacou, they are now occupied by dwelling homes and businesses. Mr. President, in the 50s, between the 50s and the 60s, Carriacou saw a heavy migration, a number of persons leaving and going to places like Aruba, the UK, and now, Mr. President, those persons are returning home, and they are returning home to build a little house for them to relax in their twilight years. So a lot of those lands that were agricultural lands, they are no longer available. As such, when you're planning for development and moving forward, you must pay attention to those things. As such, we had to start diversifying and looking at other ways to ensure that Carriacou remains a viable economic island. And so we must look at tourism, and also now we're focusing on seeing how we can harness culture, Mr. President, to provide opportunities, because it is quite limited in the area of agriculture development. Mr. President, I was involved in the last agricultural census, a livestock census, was spearheading that initiative when I was working in agriculture, Mr. President, in Carriacou. And we had, in terms of Ross stock, we had in excess about 4,000 heads of animal, Mr. President. But the challenge is, whenever the dry season comes around, we have less and less land to raise those animals. Mr. President, in terms of cattle, the amount of land that is required carrying capacity is required to rear one cattle. And I'm sure that my colleague member would know the challenge that we would have. Mr. President, the reality of it is that we do not have the space to rear cattle on a commercial basis. We can do it maybe the zero feeding initiative, zero grazing initiative, which we cut and carry and bring. But that again, Mr. President, would mean that you would have to have extensive area to grow grass and other legumes for it to cut and carry. Mr. President, it's a real situation, and you have to understand the dynamics of what is taking place with agriculture in Carriacou. Mr. President, the issue of the feeder roads, I do not see an issue with feeder roads. I don't know how we expect to get produce out from the mountains if we don't have roads so that our farmers can drive. Mr. President, I don't know if it is expected that we should still ride on our donkey backs to go to our farms. If we're modernizing, we have to modernize completely, Mr. President. So our farm roads are critical to ensure the farmers can take the resources for production to the farms and to take those produce back out for the farms to market in an appropriate and safe manner, Mr. President. So I don't see any issues with the issue of investing in farm roads for our farmers, Mr. President. They will be disappointed if we do not do that, Mr. President. Mr. President, mention was made of the Tiriel Bay passenger, Tiriel Port and passenger terminal. Mr. President, quite some time, there are a number of consultations and deliberations on this port, moving the port from Hillsborough. Mr. President, again, we have to look at it in the context of what is taking place, where we are, and if we want to take advantage of opportunities for development, we must take decisions. Mr. President, the Hillsborough jetty, I think, is probably about 20 years old. The jetty is significantly dilapidated. Based on assessment, what it would cost to construct, to rebuild the jetty, is what it will cost to demolish it. So let's just say if it costs $1 million to build a jetty, it's going to cost $1 million to demolish it. Now you invest that $1 million, you demolish it, and you spend another $1 million, you put it back. What does that do? It does not create an opportunity for the port to expand and develop. You cannot land a container on the port in Hillsborough. The port building cannot go anywhere because the seawater is right there. There is no room for expansion, Mr. President. And if you are forward thinking and you're planning for development and you want Carriacou to move forward, we need to have a better facility. And that is what this idea and decision of the Tiriel Bay port and passenger terminal is all about. That is what it's about. Mr. President, before the Tiriel Bay port was commissioned, more than 80% of marine activity was already taking place in Tiriel Bay. When the boats, the cargo boats leave Grenada on a weekly basis, twice per week, they don't go to Hillsborough. They don't go to Hillsborough. They go straight to Harveyville. And the same thing that is happening now is the same thing that's happening. All the vehicles will come to Harveyville, the trucks, the businesses, they will go to Harveyville and collect their goods. That is what is happening. Is the only difference, it is happening at a better facility. That is what is happening. But, Mr. President, there are some challenges, and those challenges mainly pose especially for persons coming from Pidi Martinique. And they are genuine and valid challenges, Mr. President.
You have 15 minutes more.
Thank you very much.
May I advise the honorable senators that at the end of that 15 minutes, we will take to the day's adjournment. And there is, in the traditions of Parliament, tea available in the dining area. So we will take the day's adjournment once Senator Cox concludes. And I think that would represent a fair and honest day's work. Okay, yeah?
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Yeah, Mr. President, so that is the whole issue around the port. As with everything else, when you have changes, there are going to be persons who are not going to be comfortable and get a customer. Let me give an example. Mr. President, I went to Carriacou about 3 weekends ago, and I decided I'm going down with the boat. Here I am in Hillsborough, relaxing, and I thinking, well, the boat leaving from town. I forgot that the boat leaving from Harveyville, I nearly get left, Mr. President. So those things are going to happen, and they're going to happen for a time. But we believe that the investment that is made in Turtle Bay is one that is important, one that is significant, one that is timely. Whatever little challenges that exist, I know that the people of Carriacou are resilient. We are going to work those out, and we're going to solve that. Mr. President, having to stand in the sun and the rain and wait for the boat, or to run into the boat to get off the boat, that has changed to a more comfortable fast. Mr. President, it's only improvement that I'm witnessing. So I believe that that is significant, and we need to continue to work with our stakeholders to ensure whatever little procedural challenges that they have, that can be addressed with the relevant authority. Mr. President, so I really wanted to touch on that issue in particular, which I think is significant. Mr. President, I also wanted to make mention, I know that a number of discussions have been going on pension, but I can't understand, Mr. President. All right, and I'm somewhat confused in some case that our dear colleague, Senator Redhead, doesn't see the need for us to have a fund for disaster at all. But he cites that we should use those monies to pay salaries and pensions and gratuities, whatever. Now, Mr. President, the same thing that Senator Redhead is speaking against is the same thing he's advocating for. Because in the issue of context, in the context of pension, the workers are thinking about the future. They're asking for a gratuity and pension because of down the road. Nobody knows if they'll meet that age to get it, but they are seeking it. Not so, Mr. President. So it's within that context that the government is saying that we live in an area and environment that we are vulnerable to natural disasters like hurricane. As such, we are planning for it. I do not see that as lack of foresight, Mr. President. Mr. President, I see that as visionary planning, Mr. President. Mr. President, the issue of us not doing anything for the workers, I was really confused about that one because I don't believe that restoring pension for 56 workers at the tune of $7.7 million is not anything. I do not believe that the removal of income tax on pensions is not anything, Mr. President. That is significant. The removal of income tax on severance pay, Mr. President. The removal of VAT on funeral, which his administration refused to do. We had to come and do it. Just imagine you're suffering, you lost your loved one, and you still have to worry about that. Mr. President, we did that. Mr. President, that is something that we will have to look at. Mr. President, we reduced personal income tax. I can't see putting monies back into the hands of workers, not something significant. I don't understand. Mr. President, I believe we we had a lesson this evening that sometimes it forces us to reiterate over and over that the only government that dealt with the issue of pension was this government. The only government that had the will and the moral backbone to deal with it, even in the face of strike, we are going to deal with it. And we are going to resolve it, Mr. President. Yeah. That is what we do. We solve problems. And we're going to do it together with our partners and to ensure that some resolve come to this matter, Mr. President. We're not going to run away. Mr. President, looking at country well-being, indicated that, I think our fellow Senator James indicated that there is nothing for the well-being of persons in this budget or in previous budget. Mr. President, we have paid salary increases, millions of dollars, to our workers. To our workers. We have done that, Mr. President. We have paid and invested in young people in scholarships, hundreds of scholarships. I don't know what is defined as well-being. Well, thousands, if we go back to 2013, Mr. President. Unemployment has reduced significantly. We have created enormous economic activity for our young people. Mr. President, you know, I am so impressed with this budget and the team at the Ministry of Finance. As a Grenadian, when I travel and I hear how some of my colleagues overseas speak of us, I wonder, when I hear how some of our own people here view us, I'm somewhat puzzled. But I'm impressed. And I prefer to be a Grenadian today, tomorrow, and any day, and any time under this administration, Mr. President. Mr. President, you know, one of the things that I am convinced that is going to happen. And sometimes I just have temporary amnesia in a good way for not wanting to remember certain undesirable things. But, Mr. President, no, we need to clarify. Sometimes we have to leave things hanging. Mr. President, recently, the Cabinet established a number of subcommittees, Mr. President, and we are focusing on development. A number of subcommittees to deal with major projects in Grenada. And one such committee is called Major Projects Committee. And that committee is charged with the responsibility, Mr. President, of restoring and constructing significant infrastructures in Grenada. One such is the Governor General residence just on the road, the York House, the museum and the library, which was raised, Mr. President. Mr. President, currently, on the government website, expressions of interest are there for investors who are interested in investing through a bold system to ensure that those buildings can be restored. Mr. President, that committee is comprised of a number of persons, a number of critical stakeholders. Just to also inform that the MP for the town of St. George's insisted that certain composition be focused on in terms of the committee to ensure that the town of St. George's do not lose its historical look. So we have persons from the Willie Redded Foundation and other critical organizations sitting on that committee to ensure that we restore those critical and important structures, Mr. President. Mr. President, we are working and we are focusing on those critical infrastructures. Mr. President, I want to close because I believe I have about 5 more minutes. I want to close by saying that as a minister responsible for youth development, sports and culture, I am happy to be given and humbled to give the opportunity to perform in this capacity. Mr. President, sometimes I just be overwhelmed by the engagements of various persons from time to time, sometimes 10 in the night, sometimes 12 in the night. As a matter of fact, it was about 1 o'clock this morning. Somebody contacted me, and not realizing that I was up. But that is the plus and the benefit that this job affords me. And I'm so proud that this government has demonstrated the commitment towards youth development. And that demonstration is quite visible, not only on this side of the House, Mr. President, but also on the other side of the House. And we must recognize that demonstration of goodwill to our nation to ensure that young persons remain the key component of transforming Grenada and transforming the Grenadian economy for 2018 and 2019 and beyond, Mr. President. Mr. President, I want to take this opportunity to extend a special thank you to yourself and the staff of the Parliament for hosting us in this beautiful facility which was designed by Caracoan. So that is very significant. Mr. President, we, from time to time as Caracoans, we sneak up here and there in very critical areas. That is how we are, and that is how things happen. But we believe we are one state. And as such, when we say Grenada, we mean Grenada, Caracoan, and Petimatic, Mr. President. And so, of course, Mr. President, that is how it is viewed. While we have a different dispensation, we are about 35 miles away from mainland. We see ourselves as one state, Mr. President. Mr. President, I want to thank my fellow colleague members for their support and also to extend season greetings to everyone in this honorable place and to say that, and something that I always insist on repeating, I think it's important that we focus on the things mostly that bring us together, that we can agree on, than the things that set us apart. And if we do that, Mr. President, I believe that we'll have a wonderful nation called Grenada, not only for 2018, but 2019 and beyond. Thank you very much, and may God continue to bless us all.
Thank you, Senator Cox. Honorable members, as indicated before, tomorrow morning we would resume the session at 9 o'clock sharp. Dr. Campbell, Senator Lewis, you all will decide which one of you will have a shot at tomorrow morning at 9. Okay. And again, just to repeat that there is evening, well, since we've jettisoned the wig, I'm kind of reluctant to say tea, but this is what it is. And members are invited to the dining area for tea. Honorable members, I wish to thank you for today's session. I thought it was rather very productive. Just let me apologize for the frequency with which I had to rely on Senator Campbell to relieve me, as I have been battling a stomach problem somewhat. A little bit under the weather. Hopefully tomorrow I'll be much more fortified. As you would notice, I missed lunch precisely for that reason, as I needed to give my stomach an ease. But I thought all in all, today was a very history-making session. I just want to correct one error which I made inadvertently, and that was to announce that the Honorable Keith Mitchell, Prime Minister and member of the other place, was in fact marking 35 years. The correction is that it's 34. Yeah, so I just wish to make that correction for the records. And just to let you know that sitting here all the way from England, somebody in the United Kingdom sent a congratulatory message to the Parliament that the Grenada Parliament was able to broadcast its proceedings through sign language. And I just thought that I would share those congratulations with all of you, members of the Parliament, because this is a very important development. As I said, hopefully not too long from now, with technology, we should be able to do the same for the visually impaired. Maybe we can rely on Citizen Rolo to tell us how he gets it done. But again, honorable members, I thought today was a good session. I wish to thank all, including the police officers and the media who is covering this session, the staff and the clerk and the staff, for today. As I said, it was a fairly extensive day. And we now bring this house to adjourn. Honorable members, this house now stands adjourned until 9 a.m. in the morning.